to drink. So, let's begin. I want to hold it like that, I guess, so you guys can see the book. Alright, here we go. The death of Ivan Ilyich. In the large law court building, during an adjournment of the Melvinsky trial, the members of the bench and the public prosecutor had come together in the office of Ivan Yegorovich Shebek, and the conversation touched on the celebrated Krasovsky case. Fyodor Vasilyevich argued vehemently that it was beyond their jurisdiction. Ivan Yegorovich had his own view and was sticking to it, while Pyotr Ivanovich, who had kept out of the discussion at the outset and was still not contributing, was perusing a copy of the Gazette which had just been delivered. "Gentlemen," he said, "Ivan Ilyich is dead." "Is he really?" "Here you are, read it for yourself," he said to Fyodor Vasilyevich, handing him the paper. Fresh off the press and still smelling. There was an announcement within a black border. "It is with profound sorrow that Praskovia Fyodorovna Golovina informs her family and friends that her beloved husband, Ivan Ilyich Golovin, member of the Court of Justice, passed away on the 4th of February this year, 1882. The funeral will take place on Friday at 1 p.m. Ivan Ilyich had been a colleague of the gentlemen assembled there, and they had all liked him. He had been ill for several weeks, and the word was that his illness was incurable. His post had been kept open for him, but there was an understanding that in the event of his death, Alexiev would step into his place, and Alexiev's place would be either taken by Vinnikov or Stabel. So, the first thought that occurred to each of the assembled gentlemen on hearing the news of his death was how this death might affect his own prospects, and those of their acquaintances, for transfer or promotion. "I'm sure to get Stabel's job now, or Vinnikov's," thought Fyodor Vasilyevich. "They promised me ages ago, and a promotion like that would give me another 800 rubles a year, plus expenses. I must apply to have my brother-in-law transferred from Kaloga," thought Pyotr Ivanovich. "My wife will be delighted. She won't be able to tell me I never do anything for her people." "I had a feeling he wasn't going to get any better," said Pyotr Ivanovich. "It's sad." "What's actually wrong with him?" "The doctors couldn't decide. They thought they all decided differently. The last time I saw him, I thought he was going to come through it. And I haven't been able to see him since Christmas. I kept meaning to go." "Was he all right financially?" "His wife had a bit of money, I think. Nothing very much." "Well, we'll have to go and see her. They live in an awfully long way away." "For you they do. Where you live, everything's a long way away." "Look at that. He can't forgive me for living across the river," said Pyotr Ivanovich, smiling at Shebek. The conversation turned to long distances between the different parts of the city, and then they walked back into session. Apart from the speculations aroused in each of them by his death, concerning the transfers and possible changes that his death might bring about, the very fact of the death of someone close to them aroused in all of them who had heard it, as always, a feeling of delight that he had died and they hadn't. "There you have it. He's dead, and I'm not," was what everyone thought or felt. But his closest acquaintances, Ivan Ilyич's so-called friends, couldn't help thinking that they would now have to fulfill some tedious social obligations, such as attending the funeral and calling on the widow to express their condolences. Closest of all were Fyodor Vasilyevich and Pyotr Ivanovich. Pyotr Ivanovich was an old friend from law school, and he felt indebted to Ivan Ilyich. Over dinner he told his wife about the death of Ivan Ilyich and the mooted possibility of her brother being transferred to their district, and then, dispensing with his usual nap, he put on a dress coat and set off for Ivan Ilyич's house. At the entrance stood a carriage and two cabs. Downstairs in the entrance hall, next to the coat stand, a coffin lid with a silk brocade, tassels and gold braid that had been powdered and polished stood propped against the wall. Two ladies in black were taking off their fur coats. He knew one of them, Ivan Ilyич's sister, but not the other. His colleague Schwartz was at the top of the stairs, about to come down, but when he saw Pyotr Ivanovich, he stopped and gave him a wink that seemed to say, "Ivan Ilyich has messed things up. Not what you or I would have done." Schwartz's face, with his English side whiskers and his lean figure in formal dress, exuded, as always, an air of elegant solemnity, and, although the solemnity belied his playful personality, it was particularly poignant here, or so it seemed to Pyotr Ivanovich. Pyotr Ivanovich allowed the ladies to pass on ahead, and slowly followed them upstairs. Instead of coming down, Schwartz stood waiting at the top. Pyotr Ivanovich knew why. He clearly wanted to arrange a game of whist somewhere that evening. The ladies proceeded upstairs to see the widow, but Schwartz pursed his lips tightly with all seriousness, though his eyes had a mischievous look as he twitched his eyebrows, directing Pyotr Ivanovich off to the right and into the room where the dead man lay. Pyotr Ivanovich entered the room and hesitated, as people always do on these occasions, not knowing precisely what to do. The only thing he was certain of was that in this situation you couldn't go wrong if you made the sign of the cross. Whether or not you should bow at the same time he wasn't sure, so he went for a compromise, crossing himself as he walked in and giving a bit of a bow as he did so. At the same time, as far as hand and head movements permitted, he glanced round the room. Two young persons, nephews apparently, one of them a schoolboy, were crossing themselves as they left the room. A little old woman was standing there motionless, and a lady with curiously arched eyebrows was whispering to her. A church reader in a frock coat, a hearty character of considerable spirit, was reading something out loud in a voice and tone that brooked no contradiction. Gerasim, the peasant who waited at the table, darted ahead of Pyotr Ivanovich, sprinkling something on the floor. Seeing this, Pyotr Ivanovich instantly recognized the slight smell of decaying flesh. When he had visited Ivan Ilyich for the last time, he had seen this peasant in Ivan Ilyich's room, acting as a sick nurse, and Ivan Ilyich had a special fondness for him. Pyotr Ivanovich kept on crossing himself and aimed a slight bow midway between the reader, the coffin, and the icons on the table. Then, when the business of crossing himself seemed to be going on too long, he paused and took a close look at the dead man. The dead man lay as all dead men lie, unusually heavy with his dead weight, with rigid limbs sinking into the soft lining of the coffin, and his head bowed for eternity on the pillow. And he displayed what dead people always display, a waxen yellow forehead with bald patches over his hollow temples, and a protruding nose that seemed to be pressing down hard on his upper lip. He had changed a good deal. He was even thinner than he had been when Pyotr Ivanovich had seen him, but, as with all dead bodies, his face had acquired greater beauty, or, more to the point, greater significance than it had in life. Its expression seemed to say that what needed to be done had been done, and done properly. More than that, the expression contained a reproach, or at least a reminder, to the living. The reminder seemed out of place to Pyotr Ivanovich, or at least he felt it didn't apply to him personally. But an unpleasant feeling came over him, and he crossed himself again hurriedly. Too hurriedly, he thought. The haste was almost indecent, before turning and heading for the door. Schwartz was waiting for him in the next room, with his feet planted wide apart from his both hands, fiddling with the top hat he held behind his back. One glance at his mischievous, immaculately elegant figure, and Pyotr Ivanovich felt restored. He could see that Schwartz was, above all this, and would be impervious to anything that might have been depressing. His very appearance spoke volumes. In no way would the occasion of Ivan Ilyich's funeral serve as a reason for cancelling their usual session. In other words, nothing would prevent them from breaking open a new pack and riffling through the cards that evening while a servant set up 4 new candles. There was, in fact, no reason to think that this occasion should stop them having a good time that very evening. He said so in a low voice to Pyotr Ivanovich as he walked past, proposing that they meet for a game at Fyodor Vasilevich's. But Pyotr Ivanovich was clearly not destined to play whist that evening. Praskovya Fyodorovna, a short, plump woman whose body expanded from the shoulders down despite her best efforts to the contrary, down out in black, and with lace shawl over her head and the same curiously arched eyebrows as the lady facing the coffin, emerged from her chambers with some other ladies, showed them to the door of the dead man's room, and said, "The service is about to begin. Do go in." Schwartz made an indeterminate bow and stood there without accepting or rejecting this invitation. Praskovya, recognizing Pyotr Ivanovich, gave a sigh, went straight up to him, took him by the hand, and said, "I know you were good friends with Ivan Ilyich." And she looked at him, anticipating a suitable response. Pyotr Ivanovich knew just as he had to cross himself in there. Out here it was necessary to squeeze her hand and say with a sigh, "Believe me." And that's what he did. Having done it, he felt that the desired effect had been achieved. He had been touched, and she had been touched. "Let's go in before they get started. I must have a word with you," said the widow. "Give me your arm." Pyotr Ivanovich offered an arm, and they made their way into the inner rooms, walking past Schwartz, who gave Pyotr Ivanovich a gloomy wink. No waste for you, then. You won't mind if we find another partner. We might make up a fivesome when you get free, said his mischievous glance. Pyotr Ivanovich sighed even more deeply and plaintively, and Praskovya showed her gratitude by squeezing his hand. Proceeding into the drawing-room, which was done in pink cretonne and lit by only one dismal lamp, they sat down near to a table, she on the sofa, he on a low pouf with broken springs that wobbled unevenly as he sat on it. Praskovya had wanted to warn him off into another chair, but a warning like that did not seem appropriate in the circumstances, so she thought better of it. As he sat down on the pouf, Pyotr Ivanovich remembered the time when Ivan Ilyich had been decorating this room and had asked his advice about this pink cretonne with the green leaves. On her way past the table to sit down on the sofa, the room was crammed with furniture and knickknacks, Praskovya snagged the black lace of her black shawl on the carved edge of the table. Pyotr Ivanovich rose slightly to disentangle, thus releasing the pouf, which quivered and pushed up at him. The widow began disentangling the lace herself, so Pyotr Ivanovich sat down again, crushing the rebellious pouf back into submission. But the widow had not finished disentangling herself, so Pyotr Ivanovich rose again, and so did the pouf, rebellious and even creaking. When this was all over, she took out a clean cambric handkerchief and burst into tears. But Pyotr Ivanovich had cooled somewhat after the episode with the lace and the battle with the pouf, and he sat there with a scowl on his face. The embarrassment was broken when Sokolov, Ivan Ilyitch's footman, came in to report that the plot which Praskovya had chosen in the cemetery was going to cost 200 rubles. She stopped weeping, and she looked at Pyotr Ivanovich with a victimized air as she told him in French how hard things were for her. Pyotr Ivanovich made a silent gesture to acknowledge his absolute conviction that it would not be otherwise. "Do smoke if you think it would like to," she said in a tone of voice that was magnanimous yet flat with defeat, and she went on to discuss the cost of the plot with Sokolov. As he lit his cigarette, Pyotr Ivanovich heard that she had made detailed inquiries about the cost of various plots of land before settling on the one she wanted. That was not all. Once the plot had been ordered, she went on to make arrangements for the choir. Then Sokolov left. "I'm doing everything myself," she told Pyotr Ivanovich, pushing aside some albums on the table. Noticing that the table was under threat from the cigarette, she swiftly moved an ashtray across and spoke again. "I think it would be hypocritical to claim that I cannot manage practicalities because of my grief. On the contrary, if anything can, I won't say console me, but take my mind off things. It's seeing to what take my mind off things. It's seeing to what won't console me, but take my mind off things. It's seeing to what has been done about him." She took out her handkerchief again, as if on the verge of tears, but suddenly seemed to get a grip on her feelings, snapped out of it and spoke calmly. "But there is one thing I would like to discuss with you." Pyotr Ivanovich bowed his head. The springs shifted under him, but he did not let them have their way. "He suffered terribly in those last few days." "Did he really?" asked Pyotr Ivanovich. "Oh yes, terribly. The last few minutes, no, hours really. He never stopped screaming. He screamed for 3 solid days without stopping for breath. It was unbearable. I don't know how I got through it. You could hear him 3 rooms away. Oh, I've been through it all right." "And he was conscious?" asked Pyotr Ivanovich. "Yes," she said, "to the very end. He said goodbye a quarter of an hour before he died, and he was still asking for us to take Volodya away." For all the disagreeable awareness of hypocrisy, his own and hers, the thought the suffering endured by the man he had known so well, first as a happy young lad, then as a schoolboy, then as an adult colleague, left Pyotr Ivanovich with a feeling of horror. Once again he could see that forehead, the nose pressing down on the upper lip, and he felt a pang of fear for himself. 3 days and 3 nights of horrible suffering, and then death. Just think it could happen to me at any time now, he thought, and he felt that momentary pang of fear. But immediately he was saved, without knowing how, by the old familiar idea that this had happened to Ivan Ilyich, not him, and it could not and would not happen to him. And that kind of thinking would put him in a gloomy mood, for which there was no need, as Schwartz's face had clearly demonstrated. Pursuing this line of thought, Pyotr Ivanovich calmed down and began to show a close interest in the details of Ivan Ilyitch's death, as if death was a chance to experience that may have applied to Ivan Ilyich, but certainly didn't apply to him. After giving a detailed account of the truly horrendous physical agony that Ivan Ilyich had endured, details that Pyotr Ivanovich learned only in terms of distressing effect it had on Praskovia, the widow clearly saw that it was now necessary to get down to business. "Oh, Pyotr Ivanovich, it's dreadful, absolutely dreadful," she burst into tears again. Pyotr Ivanovich gave a sigh and waited for her to blow her nose. When she had blown her nose, he said, "Believe me." Then she spoke out again, and told him what must have been the main reason for her consulting him. It was all a matter of using the death of her husband to get some money from the treasury. She made it seem as if she was going to ask Pyotr Ivanovich's advice about getting a pension, but he could see that she knew more than he did. She knew the finest details of the subject down to the last penny, and could be screwed out of the treasury in terms of death benefits. What she wanted to know was whether there might be some way of screwing a bit more out of them. Pyotr Ivanovich tried to think of some way of doing this, but having given it some thought and doing the decent thing by cursing the government for being so stingy, he thought there was no more to be had. Upon which she gave a sigh, and made no bones about getting rid of her visitor. He got the message, stubbed his cigarette out, stood up, shook hands, and went out into the hall. In the dining room, the clock that Ivan Ilyich had prided himself on having acquired in an antique shop, Pyotr Ivanovich came across a priest and a number of people that he knew. Free at the funeral, and he saw a pretty young lady whom he also knew, Ivan Ilyitch's daughter. She was all in black. Her tiny waist looked tinier than ever. She looked gloomy, assertive, almost truculent. She bowed to Pyotr Ivanovich in a way that suggested he was to blame for something. Behind the daughter stood a wealthy young man, also known to Pyotr Ivanovich, who looked no less offended. He was an examining magistrate, her fiancé, by all accounts. Pyotr Ivanovich gave a gloomy bow in their direction, and was about to walk through the dead man's room, when Pyotr Ivanovich's schoolboy son, the image of his father, appeared from behind the stairwell. This was the little Ivan Ilyich that Pyotr Ivanovich remembered from law school. His tear-filled eyes were those of a 12 or 13-year-old boy who had lost his innocence. Seeing Pyotr Ivanovich, he looked embarrassed and scowled morosely. Pyotr Ivanovich gave him a nod and walked into the dead man's room. The funeral service was soon underway. Candles, moaning, incense, tears, sobbing. Pyotr Ivanovich stood there with a frown on his face, staring at the legs of those in front of him. Not once did he look at the dead man or succumb to any feelings of weakness. He was one of the first to leave. There was no one in the hall. Gerasim, the servant from the peasant stock, darted out of the dead man's room and sorted through all the fur coats with his big strong hands before finding Pyotr Ivanovich's coat and handing it over. "Gerasim, how are you feeling, my boy?" asked Pyotr Ivanovich, who still had to say something. "A bit sad?" "'Tis God's will, sir. It will come of us all," said Gerasim, displaying an even white row of peasant's teeth. And then, with the air of a man who had a lot of work to do, he wrenched the door open, called the driver up, and sprang back to the porch steps, wondering what needed to be done. Pyotr Ivanovich found it particularly pleasant to inhale the fresh air after the incense, the corpse, and the carbolic. "Where to, sir?" asked the coachman. "It's still quite early, I think. I'll drop by in on Fyodor Vasilievich." And that's where he went. And there they were, sure enough, finishing the first rubber. He was just in time to make up a fifth. That's chapter part 1. And so we move on to part 2. The past history of Ivan Ilyich's life had been straightforward, ordinary, and dreadful in the extreme. Ivan Ilyich had died at 45, a member of the Court of Justice. He was the son of an official who had worked his way through various ministries and departments in Petersburg, carving out a kind of career which brings people to a position from which, despite their obvious incapacity for doing anything remotely useful, they cannot be sacked because of their status and long years of service, so they end up being given wholly false and fictitious jobs to do, for which they receive salaries that are anything but fictitious, anything from 6,000 to 10,000 a year, and this enables them to live on to a ripe old age. Such a man was Ilya Yefimovich Golovin, privy councillor, superfluous member of various superfluous institutions. He had 3 sons. Ivan Ilyich was the second son. The eldest had carved out the same career as his father, but in a different ministry, and was now near to achieving the kind of seniority that confers signature status. The third son was a failure. He had gone through various series of jobs, ruining his prospects in all of them, and he now worked for the railways. His father, brothers, and especially their wives not only hated meeting him, but forgot his existence unless compelled to do so otherwise. Their sister had married Baron Greff, a Petersburg official who cut from the same cloth as his father-in-law. Ivan Ilyich was what they called le phénix de la famille. He was neither a cold and starchy as the elder brother, nor as profligate as the younger. He was halfway between, an intelligent, lively, personable, and decent man. He had attended law school along with his younger brother. The younger brother didn't finish the course. He was expelled in the 5th grade, whereas Ivan Ilyich passed with honours. As a student, he was already the kind of person he remained for the rest of his life. A capable man, a cheerful and kind man, sociable and convinced of the need to follow the path of duty, duty being anything so designed by higher authority. Boy and man, he had avoided toadyism, but from the earliest years he was like a moth to the flame of being drawn towards people in authority. He assumed their mannerisms along with their philosophy of life, and he was in good terms with them. All the distractions of childhood and youth had passed him by, leaving scarcely a trace. He had succumbed to both sensuality and vanity, and then in the top classes to liberal thinking, but always within limits unerringly set by his own instinctive feelings. In his student days, he had done things that at first he thought as utterly revolting, things that made him feel disgusted with himself, even as he was doing them. But in later life, noticing that the same things were being done by people of high standing without a qualm, although he couldn't quite bring himself to think that they were good, he did manage to dismiss them, and he felt no pangs of remorse when he recalled them. When he graduated from law school, qualifying for the 10th grade of civil service, and received enough money from his father to buy his basic necessities, Ivan Ilyich ordered a new set of clothes from Schrammers, hung a medallion on his watch chain, inscribed with the words Respice Finem, said goodbye to the prince and the principal, dined at Donan's with his friends, and set off for one of the provinces with his fashionable luggage, linen, clothes, shaving tackle, toiletries, and travelling rug, all ordered and purchased from the very best shops, to take up a position arranged for him by his father as a special assistant to the governor. In the provinces, it did not take Ivan Ilyich long to arrange a lifestyle that was easy and agreeable, as one who had enjoyed it in law school. He did his work, pursued his career, and at the same time discreetly enjoyed himself. He went off now and then on official visits to country districts, cutting a dignified figure with superiors and inferiors alike, and he prided himself on carrying out his duties, especially in matters concerning religious dissidents, with scrupulous fairness and incorruptibility. In his official duties, despite his youth and an attitude of such frivolity, he was exceedingly conservative, bureaucratic and even forbidding. But on the social side, he was often amusing and witty, and always pleasantly polite, what the governor and the governor's wife called a bon enfant, and with them he was like one of the family. In the provinces, he had an affair with a lady only too keen to liaise with a smart young lawyer. There was also a milliner, and there were drinking sessions with visiting Ilyich, as well as an after-dinner excursions to a certain street on the outskirts. There was a need to work on the governor and even the governor's wife in order to win them over, but all of this bore the stamp of high respectability, to such an extent that no one could have called it by a bad name. All of it was created for by the French described as youth having its fling, all of it conducted with clean hands and clean linen in French phrases and, what mattered most, at the highest level of society, which meant the approval from those in authority. Ivan Ilyich spent 5 years in this kind of service, but the time came for a career change. New legal institutions were opening up, new men were needed. Ivan Ilyich became one of those new men. Ivan Ilyich was offered the post of examining magistrate, and he took it, even though it meant moving to a new province, dropping all of his old contacts and establishing new ones. Ivan Ilyich was given a send-off by his friends, who presented him with a silver cigarette case. They had a group photograph taken, and off he went to his new job. As an examining magistrate, Ivan Ilyich was just as comme il faut and respectable, just as capable of separating official duty from private life, and earning respect as he had when working as a special assistant to the governor. The new work itself struck Ivan Ilyich as far more interesting and rewarding than his earlier job. Before, he had quite liked strutting about in his charmer uniform, sauntering past anxious petitioners and envious officials, and walking straight into the governor's office, where he would sit down for a cup of tea and a smoke. But not many people had been under his authority, only the rural police chiefs and the religious dissidents that he came across on his assignments, and he loved to treat these dependent people with a courteous, almost camaraderie spirit. He loved to let them feel as though he had power to crush them, that he was being straight with them, treating them like friends. There had not been many of them, but now that Ivan Ilyich was an examining magistrate, he had felt that everyone without exception was in his power, even the most important and self-satisfied of the people. At a stroke of his pen on headed notepaper, any important or self-satisfied person could be brought before him as a defendant or witness to answer questions and be kept on his feet if Ivan Ilyich chose not to let him sit down. Far from abusing this power, he did his best to play it down, but his consciousness of that power and the very chance to play it down were what gave his new job its interests and appeal. In the work itself, the process of investigation, Ivan Ilyich soon mastered the technique of distancing himself from all irrelevancies and reducing the most complicated cases to a version that could be set down on paper in objective outline, excluding any personal opinion on his own part, while observing all necessary formalities, which is what mattered the most. This was the new way of working, and he was one of the first men to implement the reformed legal code of 1864. Ivan Ilyич's transfer to a new town and the post of examining magistrate meant meeting new people and making new contracts. He also struck a new attitude, and has slightly changed his tone. The new attitude involved distancing himself somewhat from the provincial authorities, while cultivating the best circles among the judiciary and the wealthy gentry of the town. And the new tone entailed mild dissatisfaction with the government, a degree of liberalism and civilized man's sense of public duty. At the same time, without compromising his fastidiousness of his dress sense, in his new situation, he left his chin unshaven, allowing his beard to grow as and where it wanted. In his new town, too, Ivan Ilyich set up very nicely. The section of society opposed to the governor was friendly and agreeable. His pay had gone up, and one thing that made his life particularly pleasurable was playing of whist, which he now took to what the enjoyment of a skilled card player, astute, quick-thinking, and almost invariably a winner. After 2 years working in the new town, Ivan Ilyich met his future wife. Praskovya Fyodorovna Mikhail was the most attractive, intelligent, and colourful young lady in the social circle frequented by Ivan Ilyich. To the list of other distractions and relaxations from his work as an examining magistrate, Ivan Ilyich added a mild flirtation with Praskovya. When he had been an assistant on special commissions, Ivan Ilyich had been quite a dancer, but now he was an examining magistrate who took to the floor much less frequently. When he danced, it was only as if to say, "Look, I may be part of the reformed system, and I've got as far as grade 5, but if you want to see me on the floor, I can show you that even in dancing, I can be the best." So, just occasionally, he would take to the floor with Praskovya at the end of an evening, and it was actually while dancing like this that he won her heart. She fell in love with him. Ivan Ilyich had no clear and definite plans for marriage. Once the girl had fallen in love with him, he began to wonder, when all is said and done, why shouldn't I get married? He asked himself. This young woman, Praskovya Fyodorovna, belonged to a good family and was quite attractive. She also came with a little money. Ivan Ilyich might have held out for a more brilliant partner, but she herself was a decent catch. Ivan was earning good money, and he could count on something similar from her. It would be a good match. She was a nice girl, quite pretty and thoroughly decent young woman. To claim that Ivan Ilyich got married because he was in love with his bride and saw in her someone who he wanted to share his outlook on life would have been no more justifiable than to say he married because the match met with the approval of society he had moved in. Ivan Ilyich married for both reasons. He was pleasing himself by acquiring such a wife, but at the same time he was appealing to his superiors and their sense of propriety. So, Ivan Ilyich got married. The process of getting married in the early days of marriage life, the conjugal caresses, new furniture, new crockery, new linen, everything up to his wife's pregnancy, went very smoothly, to the extent that Ivan Ilyich was beginning to think that marriage would not disrupt his easy, agreeable, enjoyable lifestyle, which was decency itself, approved by society and something that Ivan Ilyich considered to be part of life itself, and it might even improve it. But at this stage, during the first months of his wife's pregnancy, that something happened, something new, unexpected, unpleasant, difficult and disgusting, something that could not have anticipated and could not in any way got rid of. For no reason that Ivan Ilyich could fathom, other than what he called gaieté coeur, his wife did begin to disrupt the pleasant and decent run of his life. She became jealous of him for no apparent reason, demanded his closest attention, laid into him and started arguments that were unpleasantly vulgar. At first, Ivan Ilyich hoped to escape the unpleasantness of his new situation by relapsing into the same carefree but respectable way of life that had stood him in good stead before. He tried to ignore his wife's moodiness and carry on in the easy, agreeable way that he had formerly enjoyed, inviting friends around for a game of cards and trying to get out and drive around the club or visit people close to him. But there came a time when his wife started shouting at him so furiously, using such foul language, determined to keep on yelling at him when he failed to do what she wanted, obviously with each intention of keeping up until he came to heel, stayed in and went through the same anguish that she felt, that Ivan Ilyich was horrified. He realized that married life, at least with his wife, didn't always mean enjoyment and decency, but on the contrary, it often disrupted them, and it was therefore necessary to guard against such disruptions. And Ivan Ilyich began to seek ways of doing this. His work was one thing that impressed Praskovia, and it was through work and commitments associated with that he took on his wife and asserted his own dominance. When the baby was born, and with various difficulties with feeding, the real and imaginary illness of mother and child, which demanded his sympathetic involvement even though he understood nothing about them, the need for Ivan Ilyich to safeguard his independence became even more urgent. As his wife grew more and more irritated and demanding, Ivan Ilyich gradually shifted his life's centre of gravity onto his work. He loved his work more and more and became more ambitious than he had been. It didn't take long, no more than a year after his wedding, to realise that although married life did provide some conveniences, it was actually rather complex and a difficult business, and the path of duty, which meant leading a decent life approved by society, called for a clearly defined attitude as at work. And Ivan Ilyich managed to establish such an attitude towards his married life. He required of it whatever domestic conveniences it could provide in terms of meals on the table, a good household and a bed, and most important, the outward show of respectability that society required. Beyond this, he required some enjoyment and pleasure, and if he found this, he was very thankful. But if he was met with rejection and crabbiness, he immediately took himself off into his own separate, carefully guarded world, the world of work, which gave him pleasure. Ivan Ilyich was considered a good colleague, and within 3 years he was promoted to Assistant Chief Prosecutor. His new responsibilities, the importance they entailed, the opportunity of bringing people before the court and sending them to prison, the publicity given to his speeches, the success enjoyed by Ivan Ilyich in these matters, all of this made his work seem even more enjoyable. Other children were born. His wife was becoming more and more bad-tempered and crabby, but the new attitude established by Ivan Ilyich towards his home life made him all but impervious to her crabbiness. After serving for 7 years in the same town, Ivan Ilyich was transferred to another province as public prosecutor. They moved. They were short of money, and his wife didn't like that the town they had moved to. His salary had gone up, but so had their living expenses. On top of that, 2 of their children died, and the family life became even more unpleasant for Ivan Ilyich. Praskovia blamed her husband for all the setbacks they were suffering in their new place of residence. Most of the topics of conversation between husband and wife, especially about bringing up children, led to questions that reminded them of the past arguments, and new arguments were liable to flare up at any moment. They were left with few short periods of amorousness that came over them as husband and wife, but these did not last long. These were nothing more than little islands where they could anchor for a while, only to plunge back into a sea of hidden hostility as they grew further and further apart. This growing apart might have upset Ivan Ilyich if he had thought there was anything wrong with it, but now, not only did he consider this state of affairs to be quite normal, he saw it as the whole point of his role in the family. His role was to distance himself increasingly from all unpleasantness and give it an air of harmless respectability. This he achieved by spending less and less time with the family, and when he was forced to be with them, he sought to safeguard his own position by ensuring the presence of others. But the main thing was that Ivan Ilyich did have his work. It was in the world of his work that the whole interest of his life came into focus. And this interest absorbed him totally. The knowledge of the power that he wielded, the possibility of ruining anyone that he fancied ruining, the gravitas, even if it was all outward show, which could be sensed as he walked into the court or dealt with subordinates, the success that he was enjoying with his superiors and the subordinates alike, and above all, his masterful handling of the cases, all of this gave him pleasure. and along with the chit-chat with colleagues, dinners and whist filled his life to the full. And so, life in general proceeded for Ivan Ilyich just as he thought it should proceed, pleasantly and respectably. He lived like this for 7 years. Their daughter, the eldest child, now 16, another child had died, and their one remaining son was the subject of strong disagreement. Ivan Ilyich wanted to send him to law school, but Praskovia had defied him by putting him down for the high school. The daughter was being educated at home and was developing nicely. The boy, too, was doing quite well in his studies. Part 3. Eyes a bit blurry. Hope you're all enjoying the tale so far. This is great so far. Excellent. I'm glad. I'm gonna fold my legs for this part. It's very fun. It's very funny, isn't it? Most audiobooks, the narrator doesn't stop and comment on the book, but it's quite funny. The bit where he was getting up and down off the poof was so funny. Part 3. This was the course of Ivan Ilyitch's life had taken during the 17 years that followed his wedding. He was now a senior public prosecutor who turned down several transfers in the hopes of securing an even more desirable position. But then suddenly an unpleasant circumstance arose, which looked like completely disrupting the peaceful progress of his life. Ivan Ilyich was expecting an appointment as presiding judge in a university town, but Hoppy pipped him to the post and got the job. Ivan Ilyich was livid, and he made some insinuations, taking issue with Hoppy himself and his immediate superiors. He was met with a chill rebuff and was overlooked again when the next appointment came up. This was 1880. That year was the hardest he ever lived through. It was a year in which it transpired, for one thing, that they couldn't make ends meet financially, and for another, that he was a forgotten man, and whereas he saw himself as the victim of an outrageously cruel injustice, everyone else thought it was just the way things went. Even his father saw it as no duty of his to help out. He felt deserted by everyone, and they all thought that his situation, with a salary of 3,500 rubles, was perfectly normal, even fortunate. He was the only person who knew that, with all the injustices that had been visited upon him, with nothing but a nagging from his wife and the debts that were now mounting up because he was living beyond his means, he was the only person who knew that his position was anything but normal. That summer, in order to cut costs, he took leave of absence and went with his wife for a country holiday to her brother's place. In the country, with no work to occupy him, Ivan Ilyich had his first experiences of not just boredom, but unbearable anguish. He decided he couldn't go on like this. Definite steps must be taken. During a sleepless night, the whole of which he spent pacing the terrace, he decided he would go to Petersburg and make representations. He would get his own back on those men who had underestimated him by changing ministries. Next morning he defied all the remonstrations from his wife and brother-in-law and left for Petersburg. He went with one aim in mind, to get himself a position that would bring in 5,000 a year. By now he had no allegiance to any particular ministry, faction or function. All he needed was a job that would bring in 5,000 a year in administration in one of the banks, with the railways, and one of the charitable institutions set up by the Dowager Empress Maria, even in the customs service. All that mattered was 5,000 a year, and an immediate transfer from the ministry where he was undervalued. And his trip was crowned with an unexpected, unbelievable success. At Kursk, an acquaintance of his, F.S. Ilyin, got into his first-class carriage, sat down and told him that the governor of the province had just received a telegram informing him of a reshuffle in the ministry. Pyotr Ivanovich was being replaced by Ivan Semyonovich. The proposed reshuffle, whatever its impact on Russia at large, meant something special for Ivan Ilyich. The emergence of Pyotr Petrovich, and also apparently his friend, Zakhar Ivanovich was very good news for him. Zakhar Ivanovich was a colleague and a friend. The new developments had been confirmed in Moscow now. Arriving in Petersburg, Ivan Ilyich looked up to Zakhar, who had promised him a definite position in his former department, the Ministry of Justice. Within a week, he was able to send the following telegram to his wife. Zakhar replaces Miller. Appointment mine with first report. Because of this change of staff, Ivan Ilyich had suddenly achieved a position in his former ministry, which put him 2 grades higher than his colleagues, with 5,000 a year plus 3,500 rubles removal expenses. All the acrimony that he had felt towards his enemies and the ministry in general was forgotten, and Ivan Ilyich was a happy man. He returned to the country feeling in high spirits, more contented than he had been for a long time. Praskovya's spirits had also picked up, and a truce was declared between the two of them. Ivan Ilyich described how honoured he had been in Petersburg, how his former enemies had been put to shame and were now licking his boots, and how people envied him in his new position, and most of all, how popular he had been in Petersburg. Praskovya listened to all this, pretending to believe it, and not querying anything, but her real interest was only in sketching out the new way of life that they would lead in the city to which they were moving. And Ivan Ilyich was delighted to see that her plans were his plans. They were together as one, and that his life, having hit a bad patch, was now getting back to its old way, its true path to happy enjoyment and respectability. Ivan Ilyich had not come back for long. He had to take up his duties on the 10th of September, and before that he had to settle into his new surroundings, have all his things brought in from provinces, buy in and order as many more items. In other words, he had to set up a home just as he had worked things out in his own mind, which was almost exactly as Praskovya had worked things out in her own heart. And now that everything had been set up successfully, he and his wife were agreed in their aims. Having lived together so little of late, they came together more closely than they had at any time since they were first married. Ivan Ilyich had intended to move his family in straight away, but at the insistence of his sister-in-law and brother-in-law, who were suddenly all over Ivan Ilyich and his family, it was arranged for him to go alone. Ivan Ilyich set out on his journey. The happy feelings brought on by his success and rapprochement with his wife, each intensifying the other, never left him. He found a delightful place, a dream apartment for him and his wife. The spacious, high-ceilinged reception rooms and their old-fashioned decor, the gracefully appointed and comfortable study, the rooms for his wife and daughter, the classroom for his son, all of it seemed to have been designed with them in mind. Ivan Ilyich took it upon himself to organize the fittings and the furnishings. He chose the wallpaper, purchased furniture, predominantly of the old-fashioned style, which he considered to be comme il faut, the upholstery, and the whole thing grew and grew, approaching the ideal that he had set for himself. Even halfway through the refurbishment, the whole thing exceeded his expectations. He could see how elegant it would be, quite comme il faut, and devoid of vulgarity, when it was completed. As he went to sleep, he would imagine what the large reception room was going to look like. When he glanced into the half-finished drawing room, he would envision the fireplace, the screen, the what-not little chairs dotted around the room, the plates and dishes on the wall and the bronze pieces, everything in its proper place. He enjoyed the thought of inspiring Pasha and Lizanka, who were not without taste themselves. This was beyond their expectations. He had been particularly successful in tracking down antiques and buying them at bargain prices. They now gave the whole place an air of distinction. He deliberately understated everything in his letters home so that they would be surprised. He was so taken up with all of this work that he loved so dearly interested him less and less than he thought it would. In court he found his mind wandering. He would be miles away, wondering whether to have plain or moulded cornices in his curtains. He became so involved that he often did the work himself, rearranging the furniture and rechanging the curtains, rehanging the curtains. On one occasion, climbing a stepladder to show a dull-witted upholsterer how to hang the draperies, he slipped and fell, though he was strong and agile enough to hold on, and all he did was bump his side on the window frame knob. The bruised place hurt for a while, but it soon passed off. And all this time Ivan Ilyich felt particularly well and in the best of spirits. "I seem to have shed 15 years, he wrote home. He had hoped to get it all finished by the end of September, but things dragged on until the mid-October. Still, it was magnificent, and he wasn't the only one to say so. Everyone did. But these were essentially the accoutrements that appealed to all people, who are not actually rich, but who want to look rich. Though all they did manage to look is like each other. Damasks, ebony, plants, rugs, and bronzes, anything dark and gleaming, everything that all people of a certain class affect, so as to be like all people of a certain class. And his arrangements looked so much like everyone else's that they were unremarkable, though he saw them as something truly distinctive. When he met his family at the railway station, brought them home and ushered them into his well-lit furnished apartment, and a footman wearing a white tie opened the door into the entrance hall decorated with flowers, and they went into the drawing room and study, oohing and eyeing with delight. He was a happy man, showing them around everywhere, reveling in their praise and beaming with delight. That evening, as they took tea, when Praskovia asked him casually about his fall, he gave a laugh and demonstrated how he had gone flying and given the upholsterer a scare. "It's a good job I'm athletic. Any man would have killed himself, but all I did was bruise myself a bit here. It hurts when you touch it, but it's getting better. It's only a bruise." And so they began a new life in their new abode, where, as always happens with people who have recently settled in, they found themselves just one room short, and their new income wouldn't quite run to it, though it was only a matter of 500 rubles or so. Still, they were very nicely off, especially during the early days when not everything was finished and work was still to be done. Things had to be bought, ordered, rearranged, adjusted. There were one or two disagreements between husband and wife, but both of them settled, were so satisfied and so busy that everything resolved itself without serious arguments. When there was nothing more to be finished off, they developed a feeling of dullness and a sense of something missing. But by this time they had got to know new people and formed new habits. Their lives had filled out. Ivan Ilyich would return for lunch after morning in court, and in the early days he tended to be in a good mood. Any slight distress that he suffered came from the apartment itself. The slightest stain on the tablecloth or upholstery or a loose cord in the draperies annoyed him. He had to put so much effort into the furnishings that the slightest disturbance upset him. But, all things considered, Ivan Ilyич's life went along, as he saw it, just as life ought to go. Easily, pleasantly, decently. He rose at 9, drank some coffee, read the newspaper, then put on his uniform and went to court. There, the collar that he worked in had been worn into shape, and soon found that it fitted him well. The petitioners, the inquiries received, the office, the public sessions, and the administrative meetings. In all of this, the trick was to eliminate the element of crude everyday life that always disrupts the smooth flow of official business. No relationship should be entered into beyond the official ones. The reason behind any relationship had to be strictly official, and the relationship itself had to be strictly official. Say, for example, a person arrives wanting to know something. This is not the responsibility of Ivan Ilyich. He can have no relationship with such a person. But if this person were to approach him in his capacity as a member of the judiciary in a relationship that can be set down on letterhead paper, within the terms of that relationship, if Ivan Ilyich will do anything he can, and do so decisively, while maintaining a semblance of friendly human relations, nothing more than common courtesy. At the point where an official relationship breaks off, everything else breaks off too. The skill of compartmentalizing the official side of things and keeping that apart from his own real life was one that Ivan Ilyich possessed in the highest degree. Long practice and natural talent had enabled him to refine it to such a high degree that he now could act like a virtuoso performer, occasionally allowing himself to mix human and official relationships by way of a joke. He allowed himself this liberty because he felt strong enough, whenever necessary, to reinstate the distinction between the official and the human by discarding the latter. This was more than just an easy, pleasant, and decent thing for Ivan Ilyich to do. He was acting like a virtuoso performer. During his breaks, he would have a smoke, drink tea and chat, exchange a word or two about politics, current affairs and cards, and a whole lot more about who was in and who was out. And he would go home tired, but feeling like a virtuoso performer, a first violin in the orchestra who had given his best. At home, his daughter and his wife would either have been out visiting or would have been entertained someone at home, while his son, back from school, would have his session with his private tutors and gone on to cram whatever it is they teach in schools. Everything was fine. After dinner, if there were no guests, Ivan Ilyich sometimes read a book that people were talking about, and later in the evening he sat down to do some work, reading through papers, studying the law, comparing depositions, and sorting them by statute. This neither bored nor amused him. He found it boring when he might have been playing whist, but if whist was off, it was better than just sitting there with his own, or with his wife. What gave Ivan Ilyich real pleasure, though, was having little dinner parties to which he would invite ladies and gentlemen of good social standing, and passing the time with them precisely as people invariably do pass the time, in the way that his drawing room was exactly like all the others. One day they held an evening party with dancing. Ivan Ilyich enjoyed it, and everything went swimmingly, except for a big row between him and his wife over the cakes and sweets. Praskovia had her own ideas, but Ivan Ilyich had insisted on bringing in an expensive caterer who provided too many cakes. The leftovers had caused a row when the caterer's bill came to 45 rubles. The row was a big one, very nasty, and it ended with Praskovia calling him a stupid fool while he clutched his head and muttered something about divorce. But he still enjoyed the party. The best people were there, and Ivan Ilyich danced with Princess Truvovna, whose sister had famously founded the charity known as Take Away My Sorrow. Pleasure derived from work was self-indulgence. Pleasure derived from socializing tickled his vanity, but real pleasure came to Ivan Ilyich only from playing cards. He was prepared to admit that at the end of the day, with any amount of unpleasantness behind him. The one pleasure that outshone all others like a beacon was to sit down and play whist with the quiet-mannered partners. Good players, always in a foursome, sitting out with such a bore when they were 5, and you had to pretend not to mind, and playing seriously and playing well, when you get a decent hand, before going on to supper with a glass of wine. And after a game of cards, especially if he had won a small amount of, well, big winnings were not nice, Ivan Ilyich would go to bed in the very best of spirits. This was how he lived. They moved in the best circles, receiving people of quality, and the younger set. And their attitude towards the circle and their acquaintances, husband, wife and daughter, were of one mind, without collusion. Each of them in the same way shrugged off and discarded all the shabby friends and relatives who flocked around fawning on them in the drawing rooms with Japanese plates on the walls. It wasn't long before the shabby friends stopped flocking around and left the Golovin family to the best people in society and no one else. Young men were attracted to their little Lisa, and one examining magistrate by the name of Petrishkev, the son of Dmitry Ivanovich Petrishkev, and his sole heir, became so attentive towards her that Ivan Ilyich mentioned this once or twice to Praskovia, and wondered whether they ought to take him for a ride in the troika or set up some private theatricals. This was how they lived. This was how things went. Nothing changed, and everything was fine. It's the end of section 3. Everything's going great for this guy. We're this much through. His wife hates him. That's normal, right? This is how much the book is. This part. So we are just about halfway. I'm sure he won't die or anything in this book, right? I doubt it. Part 4. They were all in good health. The fact that Ivan Ilyich sometimes complained of a strange taste in his mouth and a funny feeling in his left side didn't count as ill health. But as it happened, this funny feeling began to get worse and turned into, if not pain exactly, a constant dragging sensation in his side, which put him in a bad mood. And this bad mood, which got worse and worse, began to spoil the pleasant, easygoing and respectable way of life that the Golovins had just set up for themselves. There were more and more quarrels between his husband and wife. The pleasant, easygoing way of life lapsed, and they were hard to keep putting on appearances of decency. Once again, scenes became more and more frequent. They were left once again with nothing more than those little islands, all too few of them, on which husband and wife could come together without an explosion. And now Praskovia began to say, not without justification, that her husband was a hard man. With her usual capacity for exaggeration, she claimed that he had always been horrible like that, and only her good nature enabled her to put up with it for 20 years. It was true that all arguments now began on his side. His jibes always started just as they sat down to dinner, often over the soup. There was always something. If it wasn't chipped crockery or something wrong with the food, he would go on about his son putting his elbow on the table or his daughter's hair, and it was always Praskovia's fault. To begin with, Praskovia would take issue with him and say something nasty, but on a couple of occasions he flew into such a rage at the beginning of dinner that she realised this was a pathological condition brought on by consuming food. So she bit it all back, stopped objecting, and got on with her dinner as fast as she could. Praskovia took great pride in biting things back. Convinced that her husband was a horrible man who had made her life a misery, she was now sorry for herself, and the sorrier she became, the more she hated her husband. She began to wish he was dead, and then not to, because without him there would be no income. All of which made her even more exasperated with him. She felt thoroughly miserable at the thought that even his death could not rescue her. She was exasperated, though she hid it, but her hidden exasperation served only to strengthen his exasperation. After one scene during which Ivan Ilyich had been particularly unfair, and after which, by way of explanation, he had admitted being exasperating but claimed he was ill, she told him that if he was ill, he needed treatment, and insisted that he must go to see a famous doctor. He did. The whole thing turned out to be just as he expected, as it always does. He was made to wait. The doctor was full of his own importance, an attitude he was familiar with because it was one that he himself assumed in court. Then came all the tapping and listening and the questions with predetermined and obviously superfluous answers, the knowing look that seemed to say, "Just place yourself in the hands and we'll sort it out. We know what we're doing, there's no doubt about it. We can sort out the same things we do for everyone else you care to name." It was just like being in court. The way he looked at the accused in the court was exactly the way he was being looked at now by the famous doctor. The doctor was holding forth, "Such and such demonstrates that in your insides there is such and such, but it's not confirmed by our test that this and that, then you will need to go in such, and if you go in such and such, and so on." As far as Ivan Ilyich was concerned, there was only one question that mattered. Is this condition life-threatening or not? But the doctor treated this question as irrelevant and ignored it. From the doctor's point of view, it was a pointless question, not worthy of discussion. The only thing was balancing of probabilities. Floating kidney, chronic colitis, problem with the blind gut. The question of Ivan Ilyich living or dying didn't arise. There was just this conflict between the floating kidney and the blind gut. And before his very eyes, the doctor resolved the conflict at a brilliant stroke in favour of the floating kidney, with the sole proviso that new evidence might emerge from the urine test, and if that happened, the case would have to be reviewed. All of it from start to finish was precisely what Ivan Ilyich himself had done to the accused 1,000 times, and with no less brilliance. Brilliant indeed was the doctor's summing up of the situation, as he thought in triumph, bordering on delight over his glasses at his own prisoner on the dock. From the summary, Ivan Ilyich drew only one conclusion. He was in a bad way, and the doctor didn't care. Nobody cared, probably, but he was in a bad way. And this conclusion left Ivan Ilyich with a sickly feeling, filling him with self-pity and great animosity towards the doctor who showed so much indifference to such an important question. But he said nothing about it. He got up, laid his money on the table, and said with a sigh, "I'm sure that when we're ill we ask a lot of pointless questions, but is it life-threatening or not?" The doctor glared at him through one eye over his glasses as if to say, "Prisoner on the dock, if you will not confine yourself to answering the questions put to you, I shall have to arrange for you to be removed from the courtroom. I have already told you that I consider necessary and appropriate. Anything further will be determined by the tests." The doctor bowed. Ivan Ilyich walked out slowly, climbed gloomily into the sledge, and drove home. All the way back, he kept going over in his mind anything the doctor had said, trying to translate his confusingly complex technicalities into everyday speech and find himself in them an answer to one question. Am I in a bad way? A really bad way? Or is it nothing to worry about just now? And it seemed to him that the message from all that doctor had said was, yes, you're in a very bad way. Ivan Ilyich thought that the streets looked dismal, the drivers looked dismal, the houses looked dismal, and so did the pedestrians in the shops. And the light in the doctor's confusing pronouncement, the pain, the dull, nagging pain that never went away, was taking on a new and more serious significance. It was with a new feeling of dejection that Ivan Ilyich focused on it. He reached home and started to tell his wife. His wife listened closely, but halfway through his account their daughter came in wearing a little hat. She and her mother were on their way out. She made an effort to sit down and listen to his boring story, but she couldn't contain herself for long, and her mother gave up listening. "Well, I'm very pleased," said the wife. "And now listen to me. Make sure you take your medicine properly. Give me prescription and I'll send Gerasim to the chemist's." And she went off to get dressed. He had hardly paused for breath while she was in the room, and when she went out he gave a deep sigh. "Oh well," he said, "maybe that's right. Nothing to worry about just now." He started taking his medicine and following the doctor's instructions. Through these... Sorry, it's just a little hat. I cannot stop thinking it's so funny. I'm sorry. I'll continue in a second. This doesn't usually happen in audiobooks. This really comes out a little hat. Right. He started taking his medicine and following the doctor's instructions, though these were changed once the urine tests results came in. But at this point it turned out that there was some confusion over the test itself and what it was supposed to follow it. Without getting at the doctor, it was becoming clear that what was going on was not what the doctor had said. He must have overlooked something, or he'd been telling lies, or he was hiding something. Nevertheless, Ivan Ilyich started to follow his instructions, and from the process of doing so he derived some comfort for a while. Since his visit to the doctor, Ivan Ilyich had made his main preoccupation to follow all instructions to the letter in the matters of hygiene, the taking of medicine, focusing on this pain and monitoring all his body functions. His main interests were in the human sickness and human health. When he overheard anyone talking about people who had fallen ill, died, or recovered, especially if the illness sounded like his own, he tried to hide his agitation, but he listened closely, asked lots of questions, and applied what he heard to his own illness. The pain was not getting any less, but Ivan Ilyich made every effort to make himself believe he was feeling better, and he was able to delude himself as long as nothing upset him. But the moment he fell out with his wife, or something went wrong at work, or he had a bad hand at whist, he felt the full force of his illness. Before this, he had been able to withstand setbacks like these, expecting to put things right before long, to win through, succeed again, come out with a grand slam. But now the slightest setbacks cut the ground from under him and left him in despair. He would say to himself, "Look at that. I was just starting to get better. Medicine was just beginning to work. And now this damn thing comes up. This rotten luck." And he raged against his misfortune, or against the people who were causing his problems and killing him off. He sensed that it was his own rage that was killing him, and he couldn't control it. It ought to have been obvious to him that raging against the situation, the people around him, was only feeding his illness, and because of that, he ought to ignore any unpleasant developments. But he thought the exact opposite. He told himself he needed peace of mind, so he had to do anything that disrupted his peace of mind, and the slightest disruption left him exasperated. His situation was made worse by the fact that he had taken to reading medical books and consulting doctors. The decline was so gradual that he was able to delude himself by comparing one day with another and seeing little difference. But the moment he consulted the doctor, he thought he was going downhill and fast. Yet, despite this, he kept on consulting the doctors. That month he went to see another celebrity. This celebrity told him more or less the same as the first one, but put things differently, and the consultation with the celebrity served only to reinforce Ivan Ilyич's doubts and fears. A friend of a friend, a very good doctor, diagnosed something entirely different, and even though he swore he would get better, his questions and assumptions confused Ivan Ilyich even more and deepened his suspicions. A homeopath produced yet another diagnosis and gave him some medicine, which Ivan Ilyich took for a week or so without telling anyone. But by the end of the week, feeling no better and losing faith in every treatment that had prescribed so far, including that one, he felt more despondent than ever. One day a lady of his acquaintance talked to him about the curative powers of icons. Ivan Ilyich caught himself listening closely to what she was saying and beginning to accept it as fact. This scared him. Am I really going weak in the head? He wondered. Nonsense. This is all rubbish. I'm not falling for stupid ideas like that. I'd rather pick one doctor and stick to what he says. That's what I'm going to do. That's it. I'm going to stop thinking about it and follow the treatment to the letter until summer. Then we'll see. No more shilly-shallying. This was easy to say, but impossible to do. The pain in his side went on wearing him down and seemed to get worse and worse, nagging incessantly, while the taste in his mouth got more and more peculiar, and he began to think that his breath smelled awful, and his appetite and strength fell away. The time for fooling himself was over. Something new and dreadful was going on inside Ivan Ilyich. Something significant. more significant than anything in his whole life, and he was the only one who knew it. The people around him didn't know, or didn't want to know. They thought that everything in the world was going on as before. This was what tormented Ivan Ilyich more than anything. He could see that his family, especially his wife and daughter, whose visiting season was in full swing, had no inkling. It annoyed them, and he was not much fun and asked so much of them, as if he was to blame. Despite their best efforts to hide it, he could see that he was in their way. His wife had developed an attitude of his illness, and she was sticking to it, whatever he might say or do. Her attitude went like this: "You know what it's like," she would say to her friend. "Ivan Ilyich can't be like other people. He won't stick to this treatment. One moment he takes his drops and eats, and what he's supposed to, and goes to bed, and when he should, the next day, if I'm not watching him, he doesn't take his medicine, he eats sturgeon, what he's not allowed, and he stays up playing whist until 1 in the morning." "Oh, come on," says Ivan Ilyich. "I did that once with Pyotr Ivanovich. What about yesterday with Shebek?" "It made no difference. I couldn't sleep with all that pain." "Well, it doesn't matter why, only that you'd never get better like that, and it's getting us down." Praskovia's attitude towards Ivan Ilyич's illness, of which she made no secret to other people or to him, was that it was all his fault. He was making his wife's life a misery yet again. Ivan Ilyich felt that she was doing this unconsciously, but that didn't make things easier for him. In court, Ivan Ilyich noticed, or thought he noticed, the same strange attitude towards him. There were times when he thought people were watching closely, like a man who was about to give up his job. At other times, his associates would make friendly little jokes about the way he was worried over his health, as if this ghastly, fearful, unheard-of thing that was going on inside him and was now incessantly gnawing at him and inexorably taking him away was a good subject and a laughing matter. The one who infuriated him the most was Schwartz, with his playfulness, joie de vivre, and all-round respectability which recalled the Ivan Ilyich of 10 years before. His friends had come round for a game of cards. They take the places and deal, softening the new cards. He sorts the diamonds, 7 of them. His partner bids no trumps and supports him with 2 diamonds. Couldn't be better. This should be a wonderful, joyous moment. A grand slam is on. But suddenly he feels that gnawing pain, that taste in his mouth, and he is struck by the barbarity of rejoicing in a grand slam. He glances across at his partner, Mikhail Mikhailovich, who is tapping the table with an eager hand, politely and graciously holding back from grabbing the tricks and pushing them towards Ivan Ilyich so that he can enjoy the pleasure of raking them in without having to make any effort of reaching very far. "Does he think I'm too weak to reach out?" thinks Ivan Ilyich, forgetting water trumps and over-trumping his partner with his own, which leaves them 3 tricks short of a grand slam. And worst of all, he can see how upset Mikhail Mikhailovich is, and he doesn't care. And it's awful to think why he doesn't care. They can all see that he's distraught, and they say to him, we can stop if you're feeling tired. Why don't you have a rest?" Rest? Now, he's not tired. They finish the rubber. They're all gloomy and silent. Ivan and Ilyich senses that he has caused the gloom and cannot dispel it. They have supper and go home, and Ivan Ilyich is left there alone with the knowledge that his life has been poisoned and is poisoning other people's lives, and the poison is not wearing off. It is working its way deeper and deeper into his very being, and he has to take this knowledge to bed with him, along with the physical pain and the terror, often to spend a near sleepless night because of the pain. And next morning he has to get up again, put on his clothes, go to court, talk, write, or if he doesn't go out, stay in with every one of those 24 hours that make up a day and night, each of them in agony. And he has to live like this on the edge of destruction, alone, with nobody at all to understand and pity him. It's the end of part 4. A sudden turn for poor Ivan. Do you think he hurt his kidney when he fell off that ladder? He's got a floating kidney. God, my hair looks good. Alright. Part 5. Drink some more vodka. I didn't know that, BFG. Interesting. 1 month passed like this, then another. His brother-in-law came to the town to stay with him for... hold on 1 second, actually. Start again. 1 month passed like this, then another. His brother-in-law came to their town to stay with them for the New Year's celebrations. Ivan Ilyich was in court when he arrived. Praskovya was out shopping. On his return, Ivan Ilyich walked into his study and found his brother-in-law already there, a strong, fit young man, busy unpacking his own suitcase. He looked up when he heard Ivan Ilyich approaching and stared at him in silence for a moment. That stare told Ivan Ilyich everything. His brother-in-law opened his mouth to exclaim, but managed to restrain himself. That movement confirmed everything. I've changed, haven't I? Well, you have, rather. And after this, however hard Ivan Ilyich tried to raise the subject of his appearance, his brother-in-law wouldn't say a word. Praskovya arrived home and her brother went to see her. Ivan Ilyich locked the door and went to have a good look at himself in the mirror, full face, then in profile. He picked up a photograph of himself with his wife and compared it with his likeness with what he now saw in the mirror. The difference was enormous. Then he pulled his sleeves up, looked at his arms, pulled his sleeves back and sat down on the ottoman, looking blacker than night. No, I mustn't, he told himself. He jumped up and went to the desk where he opened a file and began to read, but he couldn't go on. He opened the door and went into the hallway. The door into the drawing room was shut. He tiptoed over to it and started to listen. No, you're exaggerating, Praskovya was saying. What do you mean exaggerating? You can't see it. He's a dead man. Look at his eyes, there's no light in them. What has he got exactly? Nobody knows. Nikoliev, yet another doctor, said something, but I don't know what it was. Leshchetsky, the celebrity, said the exact opposite. Ivan Ilyich walked away back to his room, lay down and started to think things over. Kidney, a floating kidney. He could remember everything the doctors had told him about it, becoming detached and starting to wander. With an effort of his imagination, he tried to catch the kidney, stop it moving, and fix it strongly. It seemed to take so little effort. No, I'm going back to Pyotr Ivanovich, the friend who was the doctor's friend. He rang the bell, ordered the carriage, and prepared to go out. Jean, where are you going? Asked his wife, looking very gloomily, but uncharacteristically kind. The uncharacteristic kindness infuriated him. He gave her a dark look. I've got to go see Pyotr Ivanovich. He went to see the friend with a friend who was the doctor, and on with him to the doctor himself, who was in. They had a long talk. Going through the details of anatomy and physiology in terms of what the doctor considered to be happening in his insides made everything quite clear to him. There was a little bit of something, a tiny little thing in his blind gut. It could all be put right. By raising the energy levels in one organ and lowering the activity of another, absorption could be achieved and everything would be all right. He was a little late for dinner. He talked cheerfully at dinner, but for some time he couldn't bring himself to go to his room and work. Eventually he did go off to his study and he got straight down to it. He worked at the files for a while, but he couldn't shrug off the awareness that he had some important, unfinished personal business that he would have to attend before in the end. When he had finished the files, he remembered that this personal business meant thinking about his gut, but instead of giving in to this, he went to take tea in the drawing room. They had guests, there was conversation, piano playing and singing, and among them was examining magistrate who was such a good match for his daughter. As Praskovya remarked, he enjoyed the evening more than usual, but never for a minute did he forget that he had some important unfinished thinking to do about his gut. At 11 o'clock, he said goodnight and went to his room. He had been sleeping alone since the illness began, in a tiny little room next to his study. He went in, undressed, and took up a Zola novel, but instead of reading it, he lapsed into thought. In his imagination, the longed for healing of this blind gut took place. Absorption was followed by evacuation, and its proper function was restored. Yes, that's how it goes, he told himself. All you have to do is give nature a helping hand. He remembered his medicine, eased himself up and took it. Ben lay on his back, focusing on the good that the medicine was doing and the way it was getting rid of the pain. Keep taking it regularly and avoid anything harmful. I feel it a bit already. A lot better. He felt his side. No pain to the touch. No, there's no feeling there. It really is getting a lot better. He put out the candle and lay on his side. Absorption. The blind gut was curing itself. Then suddenly he could feel the same old dull gnawing pain. Quiet, serious, unrelenting. The same nasty taste in his mouth. His heart sank and his head swam. Oh God, he muttered. It's here again, it's not going away. And suddenly he saw things from a completely different angle. The blind gut to the kidney, he said to himself. It's got nothing to do with blind gut or the kidney. It's a matter of leaving or dying. Yes, I have been alive, and now my life is steadily going away, and I can't stop it. No, there's no point in fooling myself. Can't they all see, everybody but me, that I'm dying? It's only a matter of weeks or days, maybe any minute now. There's been daylight, now there is darkness. I have been here, now I'm going there. Where? A cold shiver ran over him. He stopped breathing. He could hear nothing but the beating of his heart. When I'm dead, what happens then? Nothing happens. So where shall I be when I'm no longer here? Is there really death? No, I won't have it. He jumped up, tried to light the candle, fumbling with trembling hands, dropped the candle and stick to the floor and flopped down back onto his pillow. Why bother? It doesn't make any difference, he said to himself, staring at the darkness with his eyes open. Death. Yes, it's death. And not one of them knows or wants to know. They have no pity for me. Too busy playing. Through the door he could hear the distant sounds of singing voice and accompaniment. They don't care. They're going to die too, fools. Me first, then them. They've got it coming to them. And they're enjoying themselves. Animals. He was choking with spite. And he felt a wave of agonizing, unbearable misery. It surely wasn't possible that everybody everywhere should be condemned to this awful horror. He sat up. Something's not right. I've got to calm down and think about the truth from the beginning. And he began to think. Yes, the beginning of the illness. I banged my side, but I felt just the same that day and the next. A bit discomfort, and then a bit more. Then doctors, depression, worry, more doctors, and all the time I was getting nearer and nearer to the edge. Less and less strength. Nearer and nearer. And I've been wasting away, no light in my eyes. Death is here, and I've been worrying about it in my gut. Worrying about my gut, getting my gut better. And this is death. Is it really death? Horror swept over him again. He gasped for breath, bent over and groped for the matches, leaning with one elbow on the bedside table. It was in his way, hurting him. He lost his temper with it, pressing down on it even harder in aspiration, and knocked it over. Breathless and in despair, he flopped down on his back, expecting to die at any moment. By this time the guests were leaving. Praskovia was seeing them out. She heard something fall and came in. What's the matter? Nothing, I just dropped something. She went out and came back with a candle. He lay there puffing and panting heavily like a man who'd just run a mile. His eyes settled on her. What's the matter, Jean? Nothing. I dropped it. No use talking to her, she won't understand, he thought. And she didn't. She picked up a candle and lit it for him, and she hurried out of the room to say goodnight to another guest. When she came back, he was still lying there on his back, staring upwards. What's wrong? Are you feeling worse? Yes. She shook her head and sat down. Listen, Jean, I think perhaps we ought to ask Lishtikitsky to visit you at home. This meant asking the celebrated doctor to come to them, whatever the expense. He gave her a vitriolic smile and said no. She sat there for a while, then came over and kissed him on the forehead. He hated her with every fibre of his being while she was kissing him, and it took all his strength not to push her away. Good night. God willing, you'll get soon to sleep. Yes. And that's the end of section 5. we'll move swiftly on. Section 6. Ivan Ilyich could see that he was dying, and he was in constant despair. In the depth of his soul, Ivan Ilyich knew that he was dying, but not only could he not get used to the idea, he didn't understand it. Couldn't understand it at all. All his life, the syllogism that he had learned from Kieselow's logic, Julius Caesar is a man, men are mortal, therefore Caesar is mortal, had always seemed to him to be true only when it applied to Caesar, certainly not to him. There was Caesar the man in general, and it was fair enough for them, but he wasn't Caesar, and the man he wasn't man in general. He had always been a special being, totally different from the others. He had been Vanya, with his mama and his papa, with Vitya and Volodya, with his toys and the carriage driver, then little Katya, with the delights, sorrows and raptures of childhood, boyhood and youth. Did Caesar have anything to do with the smell of that little striped leather ball that Vanya had loved so much? Was it Caesar who had kissed his mother's hand like that? And was it Caesar that had the silken folds of his mother's dress had rustled the way it did? Was he the one who had rebelled at the law school over the provision of snacks? Had Caesar been in love like him? Could Caesar chair a session like him? Yes, Caesar is mortal, and it's all right for him to die, but not me, Vanya, Ivan Ilyich, with all my feelings and thoughts. It's different for me. It can't be me having to die. That would be too horrible. These were the feelings that came to him. If I had to be like Caesar and die, I would have been aware of it. An inner voice would have told me. But there hasn't been anything like that on the inside. I've always thought, and all my friends too, that we're not the same as Caesar. And now look what's happened, he said to himself. It can't be. It can't be, but it is. How can it be? What's this all about? He couldn't understand, and he tried to banish the idea. It was false, wrong, and morbid, and replaced with proper, healthy thinking. But the same thought, it wasn't just a thought, but something that seemed like reality, kept coming back and facing him. And in order to dispel these thoughts, and he started calling up different thoughts, one after another, hoping to get support from them. He tried to get back to his earlier ways of thinking, which had protected him from thinking about death. But strange to say, everything that once protected him by hiding and eliminating any awareness of death was unable to perform that function now. In these days, Ivan Ilyich spent most of his time trying to get back to the earlier ways of feeling that had protected him from death. He would say to himself, I must get down to some work. When all's said and done, it's what I've been living for. And he would go off to court, banishing all doubts, get into conversation with his colleagues, and casually take a seat, as he had done so many times before, contemplating the crowd before him with a pensive air, and resting his wasted hands on the oaken arms of his chair, leaning over in his usual way to exchange whispered words with a colleague while toying with a file before raising his eyes suddenly and sitting up straight in order to go through the familiar words and begin the proceedings. But then suddenly there it was, the pain in his side, irrespective of where they had to go for the proceedings, and it was beginning to gnaw at him. Ivan Ilyich focused on it, drove the thought of it away, but it continued to make itself felt. It kept coming back, facing him and looking at him. While he sat there rigid, the fire went out in his eyes, and he began to wonder whether it was the only truth. And his colleagues and subordinates looked on in distress, amazed that he, a man of such brilliant and subtle judgment, was getting confused and making mistakes. He would pull himself together, try to bring himself round and somehow bring the session to a conclusion, only to return home sadly, aware that his judicial work could no longer hide him, as it once had done, from what he wanted to conceal. That he could not use his judicial work to rid himself of it. And the worst thing was that it was distracting him, not in order to make him do something, but only to get him to look at it straight in the eye. Just look at it and do nothing but suffer beyond words. And in order to escape from this situation, Ivan Ilyich sought other forms of consolation, other ways of screening it off. Other screens appeared, and for a while they seemed to be saving him. But immediately they were not so much destroyed as shone right through. It was as if it could penetrate anything, no defence being any good. Something in these latter days would go into the drawing room that had... Sometimes in these latter days he would go into the drawing room that he had furnished, the very room where he had had his fall, the room which, it was bitterly amusing to reflect, he had given his life to furnish, because he knew his illness had started with that bruise. He would go in and notice a scratch on a lacquered table, top left behind something sharp. Looking for the cause, he would find it in a decorative bronze work on an album with one edge bent up. He would pick up the album, an expensive one which he had compiled with loving care, annoyed at the carelessness shown by his daughter and her friends. It was torn in some places and some of the photographs were upside down. He would go to work at the trouble of sorting and bending the bronze work back into place. Then it would occur to him to move this entire establishment of albums over to the corner near the flowers. He would call the footman. Either his wife or his daughter would come help. They wouldn't agree. They would take issue with him. He would argue and lose his temper, but none of this mattered, because he had stopped remembering it. It was nowhere to be seen. But once, when he was moving something himself, his wife said, "Let the servants do it, you'll hurt yourself again." And suddenly it flashed throughout the screen. He saw it. It flashed at him, and even as he longed for it to disappear, he couldn't help focusing on his side. Still there, the same ache that would not be ignored. And it was staring it straight at him from behind the flowers. What was it all about? And that's the truth of it. I've lost my life here on this curtain, my battlefield. Have I really? How horrible and how stupid. It can't be. It can be, but it is. He would go into his study, lie down and find himself alone again with it, face to face with it. Nothing to be done about it. Only stare at it and go cold. End of part 6. On to part 7. How it came about in the third month of Ivan Ilyич's illness, no one could have said, because it came on imperceptibly by stages, but it happened that all of them, his wife and daughter and son and the servants, and their friends, and the doctors, and most importantly he himself, everybody knew that the only interesting thing about him now was whether it would take him a long time to give up his place, final release from the living, the oppression caused by his presence, and himself be released from his suffering. He slept less and less. He was given opium and injected with morphine, but this brought no relief. To begin with, the dull feeling of anguish which he experienced in his semi-conscious state gave him a sense of relief simply by being something new, and then it became just as agonizing as the raw pain, perhaps even more. They gave him special food cooked from recipes provided by the doctors, but the food became more and more tasteless, more and more repulsive. For the call of nature, he had special arrangements, and each time it was agonizing. The agony came from the dirtiness, the unseemliness, the smell, and also the knowledge that someone else had to be involved in it. But this most unpleasant business brought one consolation to Ivan Ilyich. The person who came to take things away was Gerasim, the peasant servant who waited on them at the table. Gerasim was a clean, fresh peasant lad, always bright and cheerful, who had fattened up on city food. To begin with, Ivan Ilyich was embarrassed to watch him, always so neatly dressed in his Russian costume, performing such a distasteful service. One day, as he got up from his chamber pot, not strong enough to pull up his own trousers, he collapsed into a soft armchair and looked down in horror as he bared puny thighs with their starkly protruding muscles. Who should come in but Gerasim, wearing his thick boots and exuding both their nice tarry smell and that of fresh winter air. Gerasim, with his light but firm tread, sporting a clean Hessian apron and a clean cotton shirt, with his sleeves rolled up and bare, strong arms, and without a glance at Ivan Ilyich, to spare the sick man's feelings, he was clearly suppressing the joyful vitality that shone from his face. He walked over to the pot. "Gerasim," said Ivan Ilyich feebly. Gerasim started, clearly worried that he might have done something wrong, and in one swift moment he presented to the sick man his fresh, kind, open young face, which was showing the first traces of a beard. "Yes, sir? This is not very nice for you, is it? You'll have to forgive me, I can't help it. Please don't worry, sir." And Gerasim's eyes flashed as he bared his young white teeth. "It's no trouble. You're a sick man." And with his quick, strong hands he did his usual thing and walked out with a light step. And 5 minutes later, with the same light step, he came back in. Ivan Ilyich was sitting there in his armchair. "Gerasim," he said, when the lad replaced the clean, freshly washed chamber pot, Would you mind helping me over here? Gerasim came across. Lift me up, please. I can't manage it on my own. I've sent Dmitri away. Gerasim came over. In one moment that was as easy as his way of walking, he put his strong arms gently around Ivan Ilyich, lifted him up and held him with one hand, pulled up his trousers with the other, and tried to settle him down. But Ivan Ilyich asked to be taken across to the sofa. Effortlessly and apparently without tightening his grip, Gerasim took him, almost carried him to the sofa and settled him down there. Thank you. You do everything so nicely. So well. Gerasim gave another smile and made as if to leave the room, but Ivan Ilyich felt so comfortable with him that he didn't feel like letting him go. That's better. Would you mind moving that chair over here? No, not that one. Under my legs. It feels easier when my legs are up high. Gerasim brought the chair over, set it squarely on the floor without banging it down, and lifted Ivan Ilyич's legs to it. Ivan Ilyich felt an easing of the pain as Gerasim raised his legs. I feel better when my legs are up, said Ivan Ilyich. Would you put that cushion under for me? Gerasim did so. He raised his legs again and put the cushion under them. Again, Ivan Ilyich felt better when Gerasim was holding his legs. When he lowered them, he felt worse. Gerasim, he said, are you busy just now? Not in the slightest, sir, said Gerasim, who had learned from the townspeople how to speak to the masters. What do you have on at the moment? What do I have on? I've done everything there is to do, except chop wood for firewood tomorrow. Well, I'd like you to hold my legs up. Would you mind? Of course I don't mind. Of course not, I don't mind. Gerasim held his legs up, and Ivan Ilyich could have sworn that in this position he couldn't feel any pain. But what about the firewood? Don't you worry about that, sir. We'll manage. Ivan Ilyich told Gerasim to sit down and hold his legs up. He struck up conversation, and strangely enough, he seemed to feel better with Gerasim holding his legs. After that, Ivan Ilyich would send for Gerasim now and then, and have his legs held up on his shoulders. He liked it when they talked to each other. Gerasim did all of this easily, willingly, and with a kindness that Ivan Ilyich found moving. Health and strength and vitality in all of the people were offensive to Ivan Ilyich. Only Gerasim's strength and vitality gave him comfort rather than distressed him. Ivan Ilyич's worst torment was the lie which was somehow maintained by them all, that he wasn't dying, he was only ill. And all he had to do was keep calm and follow the doctor's orders, and then something good would emerge. Whereas he knew that whatever was done to him, nothing would emerge but more and more agony, suffering, and death. And this lie was torture for him. He was tortured by their unwillingness to acknowledge that what they all knew, and he knew. They wanted to lie to him about this terrible situation, and they were compelling him to be a party to this lie. All this lying to him, lie upon lie, on the eve of his death, lying that was inexorably reducing the solemn act of his death to the same level as their social calls, the draperies, the sturgeon for dinner. It was all a terrible torment for Ivan Ilyich, and strangely enough, on many occasions when they were acting out of this farce in front of him, he was within a hair's breadth of screaming at them, "Stop all this lying! You know and I know that I'm dying, so the least you can do is stop lying to me." But he never quite had the nerve to do it. He could see that the awful, terrible act of his dying had been reduced by those around him to the level of an unpleasant incident, something rather indecent, as if they were dealing with someone who had come into the drawing room and let off a bad smell. And this was done by exploiting the very sense of decency that he had been observing in all his life. He could see that no one had any pity for him because no one had the slightest desire to understand his situation. Gerasim was the only one who did understand this situation, and he was sorry for him. This is why Ivan Ilyich felt comfortable only with Gerasim. It was a comfort to him when Gerasim, sometimes for nights on end, held his legs up and refused to go to bed, saying, "Please don't worry about it, Ivan Ilyich. I'll catch up on my sleep." Or else he would suddenly address him in familiar language and add, "It'd be different if you weren't ill, but with things the way they are, and why shouldn't I help you?" Gerasim was the only one who didn't lie to him. Everything showed that he was the only one who understood what was going on and saw no need to hide it. He just felt sorry for his weak and emaciated master. Once, when Ivan Ilyich was dismissing him, he put it quite bluntly, "We've all got to die one day. Why shouldn't I give you a hand?" This was to say that there was a good reason for not making a fuss out about helping him. He was doing it for the dying man, and he hoped that when his time came, someone would help him out in the same way. Apart from all this lying, or perhaps because of it, the most tormenting thing of all for Ivan Ilyich was the fact that no one showed him any pity in the way that he wanted them to. There were some moments, after long periods of suffering, when Ivan Ilyich wanted more than anything, however embarrassed he would have been to admit it. What he wanted was for someone to take pity on him as if he was a sick child. He wanted to be kissed and cuddled, and have a few tears shed over him, the way that children are cuddled and comforted. He knew he was a big man and something of a greybeard, which made this impossible, but nevertheless, that is what he wanted. And his relationship with Gerasim offered something close to this, which is why the relationship with Gerasim gave him comfort. Here is Ivan Ilyich wanting to weep, wanting to be cuddled and have tears shed over him, when in comes his colleague Shebek, and instead of weeping and getting some tenderness, Ivan Ilyich puts on a solemn and serious face, looks thoughtful, and from a sheer habit, not only comments on the significance of the decision handed down by the Court of Cassation, but goes on to defend it strongly. It was this living a lie all around him and within him that did the most poison in the last few days of the life of Ivan Ilyich. End of chapter 7. On to chapter 8. It was morning. It was morning only because Gerasim had gone and Pyotr, the servant, was there, putting out the candles, opening one curtain and quietly tidying up. Morning or evening, Friday or Sunday, it didn't matter. It was all the same. Grinding, agonizing pain, never for a moment relenting, an awareness of life hopelessly slipping away, but not yet gone. The same terrible, relentless approach of hateful death, the only reality, and still all that lying. And with all this, what did the days, weeks, and hours matter? Can I get some tea, sir? He likes good order. The masters must have their tea in the morning, he thought. But all he said was, no. Would you care to move over to the sofa, sir? He wants to tidy the room, and I'm in the way. I am dirt and disorder, he thought. But all he said was, no, leave me alone. The servant went about his work again. Ivan Ilyich stretched out one hand. Pyotr came over to help. What can I do for you, sir? My watch. Pyotr took the watch, which was lying nearby, and handed it over. 8:30. Are they still in bed? No, sir, they're not. Master Vasily, his son, has gone to school, and Madame asked me to wake her if you wanted her. Shall I do that? No, don't bother. Ivan Ilyich wondered whether to try some tea. Yes. Bring me some tea. Pyotr moved towards the door. Ivan Ilyich felt terrified at the thought of being alone. How could he stop him leaving? Oh yes, medicine. Pyotr, would you give me my medicine? Well, why not? The medicine might help. He took a spoonful and swallowed it. No, it wouldn't help. It was all rubbish. Just pretending. He felt sure of this was the old familiar taste returned, sickly and beyond hope. No, his faith was gone. And the pain. The pain. Why couldn't it just ease up for a minute? He gave a groan. Pyotr came back. No, carry on. Get me some tea. Pyotr left the room. Ivan Ilyich groaned. Not really from the pain, however terrible that it was, but from anguish. It was the same thing all the time, day and night, with no end to it. Make it soon. Make what soon? Death. Darkness. No. Anything was better than death. When Pyotr came back with the tray, Ivan Ilyich looked at him distractedly for some time, unable to work out what it was he was doing there. Pyotr was embarrassed by the long look. The embarrassment brought Ivan Ilyich to his senses. Oh yes, tea, good. Leave it there. But I'd like you to help me get washed and put a clean shirt on. And Ivan Ilyich began to wash himself. With pauses for rest, he washed his hands and his face, cleaned his teeth, combed his hair, and then took a look in the mirror. He was horrified. The most horrible thing was the limp way his hair stuck to his pallid forehead. As he had his shirt changed, he knew that it would be more horrible still to glance down at his body, so he looked away. At last it was done. He put on his dressing gown, wrapped a rug around himself, and sat down in the armchair with his tea. For one moment he felt refreshed, but at the first drink of the tea there it was again. The same taste, the same pain. He forced the tea down, then lay back and stretched out his legs. He lay down and told Pyotr he could go. The same thing again, one glittering drop of hope followed by a raging sea of despair, and nothing but pain, more anguish, always the same thing. It was depressing to be left alone, and he felt like calling somebody in, but he knew in advance that to have other people there would be even worse. Oh, for another dose of morphine. He might lose himself in that. He must tell the doctor to think of something else. I can't go on like this, I can't. An hour goes by like this, then another. The bell rings in the hall. Could it be the doctor? Yes, it is the doctor, fresh and cheerful, fleshy and hearty, with a look on his face that seems to say, "Well, now you seem to have a bit of fright, but we'll soon sort you out." The doctor knows this look is out of place here, but he has assumed it once for all, and he can't get rid of it any more than a man who has gone out visiting can get rid of the frock coat he has put on in the morning. The doctor rubs his hands cheerfully, reassuringly. "Chilly out there, thick frost. Give me a minute to get warmed up." His manner of speaking implies that he won't take long. He just needs to warm up, and once he's warmed up, he'll put everything right. "Right then, how are you feeling?" Ivan Ilyich senses that the doctor feels like saying, "How's tricks?" But even he can see this won't do, so he says, "What sort of night did you have?" Ivan Ilyich just fixes the doctor with a look that seems to ask whether he would ever make him feel too ashamed to go on lying. The doctor does not wish to understand. So Ivan Ilyich says, "No change. Terrible. The pain won't go. It's there all the time. There must be something you can do." "Yes, it's normal for patients like you to see this sort of thing. Right then, I think I'm warm enough now. Your good lady is a stickler for these things, but even she wouldn't say I was too cold. So, good morning to you." And the doctor shakes him by the hand. And now, dropping all the banter, the doctor adopts a serious attitude and begins to examine the patient. Pulse, temperature, tapping and listening. Ivan Ilyich knows full well, it's beyond doubt, that this is all nonsense, an empty sham, but when the doctor goes down on his knees, reaches across him, applies his ear, higher and lower down, and then with the gravest look on his face performs a selection of gymnastic contortions, Ivan Ilyich accedes that this is just as he once acceded to speeches from lawyers, even when he was well aware that they were lying, and why they were lying. The doctor is still kneeling on the sofa, busy tapping away, when the doorway comes in from the rustling of silk. When from the doorway comes the rustling of silk dress, and Praskovia can be heard approaching Pyotr for not letting her know that the doctor had arrived. She comes in, kisses her husband, and immediately begins to make it clear that she has been up for some time, and only a little misunderstanding had prevented her from being there when the doctor arrived. Ivan Ilyich looks at her searchingly, resenting everything about her. The whiteness, fullness, and cleanliness of her arms and neck, the sheen of her hair and the light in her eyes that are so full of life. He loathes her with every fibre of his being. Physical contact with her is agony for him because it brings on a surge of loathing. Her attitude towards him is his illness, and his illness is still the same. Just as the doctor has worked out the attitude towards his patient, which he cannot now get rid of, she has worked out a particular attitude towards him. He is failing to do something he ought to do, and it's his fault, and she lovingly reproaches him for it, and she has not been able to rid herself of his attitude towards him. He just won't do as he's told. He forgets to take his medicine, and the worst thing is he will lie there in a position that must be bad for him, with his legs up. She describes how he got Gersim to hold his legs up for him. The doctor gave a sweetly condescending smile. "Can't be helped," he seemed to be saying. "These sick people do sometimes have silly ideas. We can't blame them." When the examination was over, the doctor consulted with his watch, and then Praskovia informed Ivan Ilyich that, like it or not, she had invited a celebrated specialist to visit them that day, and, along with Mikhail Danilovich, the name of the regular doctor, he would conduct an examination and consultation. "Now, please don't argue with me. I'm doing this for myself," she said sarcastically, implying that she was doing it all for him, and this alone deprived him of any right to refuse. He scowled and said nothing. He felt that the lies that enveloped him were now so messy that he could hardly make sense of anything. Everything she did for him she was doing for herself, and she told him that she was doing for herself what she was actually doing for herself, but she made it sound so implausible that he was forced to assume the opposite. Sure enough, at 11:30, the celebrated specialist arrived. More soundings and grave consultations both in this presence and in the next room concerning the kidney and the blind gut, with questions and answers expressed with such an air of gravity that instead of the real life and death question, which was the only question staring him in the face, up came the question of his kidney and the blind gut, which were not doing quite what they should, and which would shortly be set upon by Mikhail Dalinovich and make work properly. The celebrated specialist took his leave, looking serious but not hopeless, and in answer to the question put to him diffidently by Ivan Ilyich, whose eyes were glistening with fear and hope as to whether there was any possibility of recovery, he replied that nothing could be guaranteed, but there was always a possibility. The look of hope on Ivan Ilyич's face as he watched the doctor leave was so pathetic that when he saw it, Praskovia actually burst into tears as she walked out of the study to give the celebrated specialist his fee. The lifting of his spirits induced by the doctor's words of encouragement was short-lived. It was still the same room, the same pictures, curtains, wallpaper, medicine bottles, and the same body, his body, still suffering, racked with pain. And Ivan Ilyich began to moan, so they gave him an injection, and he lapsed into unconsciousness. When he came to, it was getting dark. They brought him his dinner. He forced down a little thin soup, then it was the same again, with another night coming on. When dinner was over, at 7 o'clock, Praskovia came in, dressed for going out, and her ample breasts well supported the traces of powder on her face. That morning she had been reminded him that they were going to the theatre. Sarah Bernhardt was in town, and they had a box which they had taken at his insistence. By now he had forgotten this, and he was offended to see her dressed up, but he hid his feelings when he remembered having insisted that they reserve the box and go, this being an aesthetic experience of educational value for the children. As she came in, Praskovia had looked pleased with herself, if rather guilty. She sat down on the edge of the chair and asked how he was feeling, though he could see that she was asking for the sake of asking, rather than to find out. Since she knew there was nothing to find out, and then she launched into what she felt she had to say, that nothing would have induced her to go out tonight, but the box had been reserved. Helene and her daughters were going in, so Petrishkev, their daughter's fiancé, the examining magistrate, and they couldn't be allowed to go alone. But for that, she would have preferred to stay with him, and he must be sure to follow the doctor's orders while she was out. Oh yes, and Theodore, the fiancé, would like to come in, do you mind? And Lisa, let them come in. In came his daughter, dressed up to the nines, an exposed young body. Well, his body was causing him so much suffering, and she was flaunting it, healthy and strong, obviously in love. She had no time for illness, suffering, and death, which were marring her happiness. In came Fyodor Petrovich, also in evening dress and sporting an à la Coppel's hairstyle. The veins stood out on his long neck, which was squeezed into his tight collar over a vast expanse of white shirt front, and his narrow black trousers were tightly stretched over his strong thighs. One of his hands wore a close-fitting white glove, and he carried an opera hat. Creeping in unobtrusively behind him came the schoolboy, wearing a new uniform and gloves, poor chap, with terrible dark blue rings under his eyes, the meaning of which was not lost on Ivan Ilyich. He had always felt sorry for his son, and his frightened, compassionate look was dreadful to behold. Apart from Gerasim, Ivan Ilyich thought Vasya was the only one who understood and felt sorry for him. They all sat down and asked how he was feeling. Then, for a while, no one spoke. Lisa asked her mother whether she had the opera glasses. Mother and daughter had a little argument about who had put them where. It ended nastily. Fyodor asked Ivan Ilyich whether he had seen Sarah Bernhardt. At first, Ivan Ilyich didn't quite catch the question but then said, "No, have you?" "Yes, in Adrien Lecouvre. Praskovia mentioned something she had been particularly good in. Her daughter demurred. They were often to conversation about her charm and naturalism as an actress, the same old conversation that everybody else has. In the midst of it, Fyodor looked across the room at Ivan Ilyich and suddenly broke off. The others looked, and they stopped too. Ivan Ilyich was staring straight ahead, his eyes glittering, and he obviously furious about them. Things had to be put right. but there was absolutely no way of putting things right. Somehow the silence had to be broken. No one made a move, and everyone was becoming terrified that the living lie demanded by the proprietary would somehow be shattered and seen by everyone for what it was. It was Lisa who made the first move. She broke the silence. She wanted to cover up what everyone was feeling, but by speaking out, she revealed it. "Oh well, if we're going, it's time we got started," she said, glancing at her watch, a present from her father, and she smiled almost imperceptibly at her young man to convey something known only to the two of them as she got up, rustling her skirts. They all got up, took their leave, and drove off. When they had gone, Ivan Ilyich seemed to feel easier. The lie had gone away with them, but the pain was still there. And that same pain, that same feeling of dread, made sure that nothing was harder, nothing easier. Everything was worse. Once again the minutes passed, one after the other. Then the hours, one after the other. It was always the same, endlessly, and inevitably end itself with all the more horrible. "Yes, send Gerasim in," he said in reply to a question from Pyotr. Section 9. It was late at night when his wife returned. She tiptoed into the room, but he heard her. He opened his eyes and rapidly closed them again. She wanted to dismiss Gerasim and sit with him herself. He opened his eyes and said, "No, you go." "Are you in a lot of pain?" "It doesn't matter." "Take some opium." He consented and drank some. She went away. Until about 3 in the morning, he was in a state of excruciating pain and delirium. He dreamt that somehow he was being forced, along with his pain, into the depths of a narrow black sack, being forced further and further in, and not quite getting air. It was a harrowing, agonizing process, and he was scared. He wanted to get through and out. He was struggling and trying to help. Then suddenly he lost in his hold and fell and woke up. Gerasim was still there, sitting at the foot of the bed, dozing quietly and patiently, and he himself was lying there with his withered, stalking legs raised up on Gerasim's shoulders. The same candle was there, with its shade and the same unremitting pain. "Go away, Gerasim," he whispered. "I don't mind, sir. I'll stay just a bit longer." "No, you go away." He lowered his legs, turned sideways onto one arm, and felt sorry for himself. He waited only for Gerasim to go out into the next room, and then he could restrain himself no longer. He burst into tears like a child. He was weeping because of his own helpless state, and his loneliness, and the other people's cruelty, and God's non-existence. "Why hast thou done all this? Why hast thou brought me to this point? Why, oh why dost thou torture me like this?" He was not expecting any answers. He was weeping because there was not and could not be any answers. The pain struck him again, and he didn't move and didn't call out. He said to himself, "Here it comes again. Hit me then. But what's it for? What have I done to thee? What is it for?" Then he fell silent, and not only stopped crying, he stopped breathing. Suddenly he was all ears. He seemed to be listening, not to a voice speaking in words, but to the voice in his soul, and the thoughts welling up in his mind. "What do you want?" was the first expressionable concept that came to him. "What do you want? What do you want?" he repeated to himself. "What is it?" "No more pain. Staying alive," came the answer. And once again his concentration became so intense that not even the pain could distract him. "Staying alive? How?" asked the voice of his soul. "Oh, life like it used to be, happy and good." "Life like it used to be, happy and good," came the voice. And in his imagination he started to run through the best times of his life. But what was strange was that all the best times of his life no longer seemed anything like what they had before. Nothing did, except the first recollections of his childhood. There, in his childhood, there was something truly happy that he could have lived with if it returned. But the person living out the happiness no longer existed. It was like remembering someone quite different. At this point, where he, today's Ivan Ilyich, began to emerge, all the pleasures that had seemed so real melted away and now before his eyes and turned into something trivial and often disgusting. And the further he was from childhood, the nearer he got to the present day, the more trivial and dubious his pleasures appeared. It started with law school. That had retained a little something that was still really good. There was fun, there was friendship, there was hope. But in the last years, the good things had become more exceptional. Then, at the beginning of his service with the governor, some good times came again, memories of making love to a woman. Then it became all confused, and the good times were not so many. After that, there was fewer still. The further he went, the fewer there were. Marriage, an accident, and such a disappointment as his wife's bad breath and all the sensuality and hypocrisy, and the deadliness of his working life, and those money worries going on for a year, 2 years, 10, 20, always the same old story, and the longer it went on, the deadlier it became. As if I had been going downhill when I thought I was going uphill. That's how it was. In society's opinion, I was heading uphill, but in equal measure, life was slipping away from me. And now it's all over. Nothing left but to die. What's it all about? What's it for? It's not possible. It's not possible that life could have been senseless and sickening as this. And if it has really been as sickening and senseless as this, why do I have to die and die in agony? There's something wrong. Maybe I didn't live as I should have done, came the sudden thought. But how can that be when I did everything properly? He wondered, instantly dismissing as a total impossibility the one and only solution to the mystery of life and death. So what do you want now? To live? Live how? To live as you do in court when the usher yells out, "The court is in session. Court in session, sessions in court," he repeated to himself. "Here comes the judgment, but I'm not guilty," he cried out angrily. What is it for? And he stopped crying, turned to face the wall, and let his mind dwell on one single question. Why all this horror? What's the reason for it? But, for all his dwelling on it, he could find no answer. And whenever the thought occurred to him, which it did often, that it was all happening to him because he had been living the wrong kind of life, he would instantly remember how proper his life had been, and dismiss such a bizarre notion. Section 10. Another 2 weeks went by. Ivan Ilyich no longer rose from his sofa. He didn't care to lie in his bed, so he lay on the sofa. And lying there, almost invariably facing the wall, he endured all inexplicable agony and solitude. And in solitude he brooded on the same inexplicable question. What is this? Can it really be death? And an inner voice would reply, yes, that's what it is. What is this torture for? And the voice would reply, it's just there. It's not for anything. Above and beyond, there was nothing. From the very onset of his illness, since the first time he'd been driven round to see the doctor, his life had divided itself into two opposite and alternating moods, either despair and the anticipation of a horribly incomprehensible death, or hope accompanied by an obsessive fascination with the workings of his body. He had eyes for only two things, either a kidney or blind gut that had temporarily stopped doing what it should do, or a horribly incomprehensible death, which there was no way to avoid. These two moods alternated in him from the very outset of his illness, but the further the illness progressed, the more dubious and preposterous his notions of a kidney became, and the more realistic was his awareness of impending death. All he had to do was remember what he had been like 3 months before, and what he was now. Remember how steadily he had gone downhill, and any possibility of hope was shattered. In his last days of solitude, when he found himself lying there facing the back of the sofa, solitude in the midst of a populous city and his own friends and family, a solitude more complete than anything anywhere, at the bottom of the sea or in the bowels of the earth, in these last days of terrible solitude, Ivan Ilyich lived only in recreating the past. Images of his past life came back to him one after the other. This process always began with the most recent ones and proceeded back to the most remote, to childhood, and there it lingered. If Ivan Ilyich remembered the stewed prunes he had been offered for dinner that day, he would remember the raw and wrinkly French prunes of his childhood, their special taste and how his mouth watered when it got down to the stone. Along with the memory of that taste would come a whole series of further memories of that time. His nurse, his brother, his toys. No, don't do that, it's too painful, Ivan Ilyich would say to himself, transporting himself back to the present. There it was, a button on the back of the sofa, creases in the Morocco. Morocco is expensive and it doesn't wear well. It started with an argument, but that was different Morocco and a different argument. When we tore father's briefcase and got punished and mother brought us some tarts. Once again his thoughts were settling on his childhood, and again they were too painful for Ivan Ilyich, so he tried to drive them away and think of something else. And once again, along with this train of recollections, another train of recollections troubled his spirit, the way in which his illness had grown worse and worse. Here too, the further back he went, the more life there was, more goodness in life, more of life itself. The two were merging. It's like the pain getting worse and worse. All of my life has been getting worse and worse, he thought. There was one point of light back there at the beginning, but after that, everything had been getting blacker and blacker. In inverse proportion to the square of the distance from death, he thought, and this image of stone accelerating as it flies down imprinted itself on his soul. Life is a series of increasing suffering, flies even faster towards its end, the most terrible suffering. I'm flying somewhere. He would shiver and shudder, trying to resist, but he knew now that the resistance was impossible, and he would turn his eyes to the back of the sofa, eyes that were weary of looking, but he couldn't stop looking at what lay ahead. And he was waiting for that terrible fall, shock and annihilation. Resistance is impossible, he would say to himself, but if only I could see what it's all about. No, that's impossible too. There would be an explanation if I could say I've been wrong in the way I've lived my life, but you couldn't say that. It's not possible, he would tell himself. Recalling how fastidious he had been about the propriety and respectability of his life. You can't say that, it's not possible, he would tell himself, twisting his lips into a smile, as if someone might see it and be taken by it. There is no explanation. Agony and death. What for? Section 11. 2 weeks went by like this. During those 2 weeks, an event took place that Ivan Ilyich and his wife had been hoping for. Petrushkev made a formal proposal. It happened one evening. The next morning, Praskovya came in to see her husband, wondering how best to break the news of Fyodor's proposal, but during the night Ivan Ilyich's condition had taken another turn for the worse. Praskovya found him on the sofa, but in a different position. He was lying flat on his back, moaning and staring ahead with a fixed look. She started talking about his medicine. He transferred his gaze to her. She didn't finish what she started to say. There was so much enmity in that gaze, and it was levelled straight at her. "For Christ's sake, let me die in peace," he said. She made as if to leave the room, but at that moment in walked their daughter, who came over to say good morning. He gave her the same look as he directed as his wife, and in response to her inquiries about his health, he said dryly that soon he would no longer be a burden to them. Both of them sat on for a while, saying nothing, and then they left. "What have we done wrong?" Lisa asked her mother. "Anyone would think it's our fault. I'm sorry for Papa, but why do we have to suffer?" The doctor arrived at his usual time. Ivan Ilyich responded to him with a yes and no, fixing him with a malevolent look, and finally he said, "Look, you know you can't help me. Just leave me alone." "We can ease the pain," said the doctor. "You can't. Leave me alone." The doctor went out into the drawing room and told Praskovya that things were very bad. Only one thing could help: opium. That might ease the pain, which must be dreadful. The doctor said that physical pain must be dreadful, which was true, but more dreadful than the physical pain was the suffering in spirit, his greatest agony. His spiritual suffering took the form of a thought that had suddenly struck him that night as he looked at Gerasim's sleepy-eyed, good-natured face with his high cheekbones. What if I really have been wrong in the way I've lived my whole life? My conscious life. It occurred to him that what had once seemed a total impossibility, that he had not lived his life as he should have done, might actually be true. It occurred to him that the slight stirrings of doubt he had experienced about what he was considered to be good by those in the highest positions, slight stirrings that he had immediately repudiated, that these misgivings might have been true and everything else might have been wrong. His career and the ordering of his life, his family, the things and preoccupied people in the society and work, all of this might have been wrong. He made an attempt at defending these things for himself, and suddenly he sensed the feebleness of what he was defending. There was nothing to defend. But if it's like that, he said to himself, and I am leaving this life knowing I've ruined everything I was given, and it can't be put right, what then? He lay on his back and started to go through his whole life again in a different way. Next morning when he saw his servant, then his wife, then his daughter, then the doctor, their every moment, their every movement, and every word bore out the terrible truth that he had been revealed to him during the night. In them he saw himself and all he had lived by, and he could clearly see that it all was wrong. It was all gross deception obscuring life and death. This knowledge exacerbated his physical suffering, making it 10 times worse. He moaned and writhed and clutched at his clothing, which seemed to be choking and stifling him, and he hated them for it. After me giving a heavy dose of opium, he lost consciousness, but by dinner time it all began again. He sent everyone away and lay there tossing and turning. His wife came to him and said, "Jane, darling, please do this for my sake, for her sake. It can't do any harm, and it often helps. Look, it's nothing much, even healthy people." He opened his eyes wide. "What, take communion? What for? I'm not doing that. I don't know." She burst into tears. "All right, my dear, I'll send for our priest. He's such a nice man." "All right, that's fine," he said. When the priest came and heard his confession, Ivan Ilyich relaxed, feeling some relief from his doubts and therefore from his suffering, and he experienced a moment of hope. His mind turned again to his blind gut and the possibility of a cure for it. When he took communion, there were tears in his eyes. When he was laid down after taking communion, he felt better for it. There was hope that he might live on. His thoughts turned to the operation that he had been offered. "I want to live, I do want to live," he said to himself. His wife came in and greeted him after communion. She said the usual things and then added, "You really do feel better, don't you?" "Yes," he said, looking away. Her clothes, her figures, the look in her face, the sound of her voice, all said the same thing to him. "This is wrong. Everything you have lived by and still do is a lie, deception that hides life and death away from you." And the moment this thought occurred to him, his hatred welled up, and along with the hatred came came physical suffering and agony, and along with the agony came awareness of the inevitable destruction that was now close. There was something different about it, a twisting, shooting pain, and constricted breathing. The look in his face as he said yes had been dreadful. When he had got the word out, looking at her, he wrenched himself over, face down remarkably quickly for one so weak, and roared at her, "Get out! Go away and leave me alone." Final chapter 12. From that moment on, the screaming began. It went on unbroken for 3 days, so terrible that people 2 rooms away were horrified to hear it. At the moment when he had answered for his wife, he had realized he was done for. There was no way back. The end was here. The absolute end, and his unresolved doubts would remain as doubts. "Oh, ho, ho," he cried, varying the tone. He began by crying out, "Oh no," and went on to scream the letter, "Oh." Throughout the days, during which time had ceased to exist for him, he struggled with the black sack into which he was being crammed by an invisible, unstoppable force. He resisted like a condemned man resisting his executioner, knowing that he is not going to be spared, and with every minute passed, he sensed that, despite all his fighting and struggling, he was getting nearer and nearer to the thing that terrified him. He sensed that the pain came from being thrust into that black hole, and, what was worse, not being able to get through. What was preventing him from getting through was his insistence that his life had been a good one. This vindication that his life was holding him down, preventing him and moving on, and causing him the greatest suffering. Suddenly he felt a strong jolt in his chest inside and a further constriction of his breathing. He was into the hole, and there was an end of the hole, a kind of light that was shining. What was happening to him was like when he had been in a railway carriage and you think you're going forwards, but you're really going backwards. And suddenly you know what the right direction is. "Yes, it's been wrong, it's all been wrong," he told himself. "But that doesn't matter. It's possible to do the right thing. But what is the right thing?" He wondered, and suddenly he was calm. It was nearing the end of the 3rd day, an hour before his death. At that very moment, his schoolboy son crept in to see his father, and crept over to his bed. The dying man was still screaming desperately and waving his arms about. His hand happened to catch the boy's head. The boy took hold of it, pressed it to his lips, and burst into tears. This was the very moment when Ivan Ilyich had fallen through and seen a light, and it was revealed to him that his life had not been what it should have been, and that it could still be put right. He was wondering what the right thing was, and he calmed down, listening. Now he could feel someone kissing his hand. He opened his eyes and looked at his son. He felt sorry for him. His wife came over. He looked at her, with her mouth open and the tears not wiped away from her nose and cheek. She was looking at him in despair. He felt sorry for her. Yes, I'm hurting them, he thought. They feel sorry for me, but they'll be all right when I'm dead. He wanted to tell them this, but he wasn't strong enough to get the words out. Anyway, no good talking, must do something. He looked at his wife, motioned to their son and said, "Take him away. Sorry for him, and you." He tried to say, "Forgive me," but it came out as, "For goodness." Too weak to correct himself, he waved his hand, knowing that he who needed to would understand. And suddenly everything was clear to him. What had been oppressing him and would not go away was now going away, all at once, on 2 sides, 10 sides, all sides. He felt sorry for them, and he must do something to stop hurting them, set them free, and free himself from all this suffering. So nice and so simple, he thought. But what about the pain? He wondered. Where's it gone? Hey, pain, where are you? He listened and waited. Oh, here it comes. So what? Bring on the pain. What about death? Where is it? He was looking for this earlier, accustomed fear of death, but couldn't find it. Where was death? What death? There was no fear whatsoever, because there was no death. Instead of death, there was light. So that's it, he said suddenly out loud. Oh, bliss. All of this happened to him in a single moment, and the meaning of that moment was not going to change. For those present, his agony went on for another 2 hours. There was a rattling in his chest, his wasted body shook, then the rattling and the wheezing dwindled away. "He's gone," said someone over him. He caught these words and repeated them in spirit. "Death has gone," he told himself. "It's gone." He took in some air, stopped halfway through a deep breath, stretched out, and died. The end of the death of Ivan Ilyich. Did you all enjoy it? I was just looking something up. It wasn't a dream. The guy's dead. What did you guys think? What were your thoughts? I followed along with in my copy of the book. Oh, that's lovely. That's really nice. I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was very funny at times. It's rare that something will make me actually laugh. Like a book, anyway. But the part the part where he came home and he was talking about how he's going to die, and they came in with a little hat, and then they go out, they're like, whatever, and they just leave. But he had he lived a shitty life. He was a shithead. Don't forget that. The guy was a shithead, you know? He was, he lived his life in a weird way that in the end he regretted. The very end, though. and he died because of how he lived, right? He wouldn't have had this kidney problem if he hadn't been doing up his house to be all fancy. I do wonder, do you think that he could have been cured? Because there was like a lot of talk in there about like, oh, he's not been taking his medicine properly, and it doesn't feel like this condition would have been like something that like it felt like they knew how to fix this problem, but he didn't like follow the regimen of treatment. Maybe she poisoned him. I don't know about that. It just sounded like he wasn't following his treatment regimen. She wouldn't poison him because she needed him. She needed his money. She said that at some point. Praskovia. I hope the voices were okay. And the pronunciation. I actually think I did pretty good with the pronunciations, actually, on the fly. Petrishkovna? I think I got that one. I think I mixed up that one a little bit. But it was pretty interesting. Feels like they could handle a travelling kidney, but that's why I think that he wasn't following his treatment regimen correctly. Because they would tell him to do certain things. Maybe it was psychosomatic. Oh, that's interesting. It's an interesting theory. That's very interesting. Well, that's it. I've been given some food. So, I hope you've enjoyed this YouTube. If you want to see more, tell me. Tell me which ones to read. I would love to read different books, particularly like sci-fis. I was interested in this book because I am fascinated by small books. This is a small book, as you can see. I have a small collection of small books, and I would love to read more, but they are copyrighted. I've already contacted Tolkien Estate, BFG, if you recall, and they said no. I think I still have the letter somewhere. So I am familiar with H.G. Wells. I've read several H.G. Wells. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a break here. That book was 93 pages, I think, yeah. 100-page books. If I ever wrote books, I would write sci-fi books, Twilight Zone-esque stories, but I would want them to be like 100 pages, 110 pages, you know? And then you could have like a whole set of them. You could read them in like an hour and a half, 2 hours. How long is it taking us? 2 hours, 2.5 hours. So what I'll do is I'll take a break while I eat whatever food I have here. And I will be back. I was going to end the stream, but it's a bit early, so I'll play some Darkest Dungeon when I come back. But I'm going to take a 5-minute break to eat. Get yourself a drink and a snack. Back in a few. All right. Let's go kill some subs. All right, yo. All right. Let's get gaming.
In time, you will know the tragic extent
for gabbing
of
that guy.
failings.
6 more recruits. They're all level 0 apart from these 2 guys. I think we'll leave it for now. Now, I know we need a new Frax character. But I don't know if we should wait to get maybe he'll come back from the dead, you know? Okay, yeah, Badger's definitely coming with us. Bleed resist. Okay, we need to do this one. This is really good. Okay. Oh, wait, Badger, you're too high level. You're not going to come in this one. We'll take you to the boss and the court. Let's take Patrick, Avlian, Lothardax, and Rithian. Have that and that. You can have that. Have your book. Where are we going? The Warrens. I'm going to waste away. You're not wasting. You're okay. You're fine. The Warrens. Disease. That should be an easy mission anyway. Rithian. Healing skills. Oh yeah, you've got yours. Okay. Actually, let's give you that. Back to town. Let's get Sem 9 relieved of stress. Sem 9 has a lot of stress. Satella has a little bit of stress. Anyone needing treatment? Lynx is getting treated. bleed, 10% bleed resist. Get that rid of off of Satalo. That's a bad one. Minus 20%. Divine Grace. Minus 20%. Divine Comfort. 20. What does that mean? I don't quite know. Badger, what do you have? You've got the same thing. Scientific. Divine Grace. Minus 20%. Divine Comfort. What? I don't understand that. Radapod, do you have any you want to get rid of? Winded. Wholesome Devil. And Tim will only meditate, that's irritating. But again, not the worst. Final Limit. Torn Rotator. It's fine. Only Prey. Intense craving for alcohol. Stress in the Wield. Geo. Wait, what's Satala going? What's Radapod going? What's his locked in ones? Stress versus animals. Kaz, what have you got? Fear of Unholy. 20% stress if torch is above 75. Okay, I'm gonna maybe get rid of that one. That's a bad one. Yeah. Because I like my torch above 75. You've got Torn Rotator, but that's okay. You don't use your arms much. You just do heals. 20% bleed resist. Pretty good. I'm going to buy that. Alright, let's embark. Provision. A medium apprentice. You have to just gather 3 grains of sand or what, sacks or whatever. So, food. Torches. Two shovels. 2 keys. 2 bandages. An unholy thing. Who has... Nobody needs blood. I'll take 2 more torches. Right, this is good. We have torches, we have food, we have trinkets. Let's go. You're going on the next mission, Badger, by the way.
Even the fiercest beast will lay down when it is not eaten. Steal their food.
Battle with a curio. Quest location there.
A handsome reward for a task.
Collecting grains of grain, sands of grain, packs of grain. Maybe you'll be allowed some opium. Opium sounds tasty. What does this mean? Oh, I need. Where's my darkest dungeon experts? What does this mean? Debuff. Yeah, that makes sense. Alright, we have to open this, by the way, because we need a Baron's invite so we can go to the court with Badger. Because we've got a crocodile to fight. don't we? Heal? So what? Oh, it gives him a heal. Oh, okay. Aveline's got a different spec that I'm used to. Works different for those with Crimson Curse. Whoa.
Eradicated.
You have to kill this guy. It's gonna do an elusive exit. Wait, did Rythian just get given the Crimson Curse? I just realised. That's bad. There's something wrong with my eyes today. I felt it all through the reading. Don't know if you can tell, but like I'm blinking like all the time. It's like my eyes constantly something in my eye.
The match is struck. A blazing star is born.
I see it there, my vision keeps blurring.
Confidence surges as the enemy crumbles.
Nice. Okay, he's dead. What's the dex? Doing good damage? No, it's definitely that, but it's also like I've been having it since I woke up, and then my eyes have been weeping as well, a little bit, like crying. That's why you see me put the my handkerchief to my eye now and again.
For death by inches.
Two damage, 4 health.
Their formation is
Invitation.
broken.
We need an invitation.
Maintain the offensive.
You didn't get it. Damn. That's annoying. And eye drops now. I've never taken eye drops. Right. We've got to kill this guy. He must not elusive exit. Nice, he's dead. I wouldn't say his eye floaters, it's just like my eye's irritated. You know?
Slowly.
Gently.
This is how a life is taken.
Because I'm tearing up as well. I have an anti-venom. And kill this fly. Ugh.
Continue the onslaught.
That's how we do it.
Destroy them all.
Everyone's so stressed already, by the way. Why is this guy so... Why is Rythian so stressed?
Press this advantage. Give them no quarter.
You're joking. Last hit. And he gets Patrick infected. Oh, we got Baron's invite though, that's good.
As victories mount, so too will resistance.
Hmm. 97 stress on Rythian. Let's just camp. Well, I can't camp until we go in here. I don't want Rythian to get a thingy.
Spirits are lifted, and purpose is made clear. Glittering gold, trinkets and baubles, paid for in blood.
Starting to reduce Rythian's stress. Oh, why is so fucking stressed? Self, remove blight, remove healing. Oh yeah, this guy removes diseases from himself. Lothar Dex doesn't have any diseases. This person has 2. What? Why would I ever use this? Lashes Anger and Lashes Solace. Gives him 40 stress, takes away 50 stress. What? Okay, we have to do that, I think. And encourage Rythian. Five left. Yes, we'll do that as well. Right, ready and stop getting stressed.
The light, the promise of safety.
I bet it's over here, in the sneaky little corridor. Whoops.
Mind that such missteps are the exception, and not the rule.
It's worms. Has anyone been playing Hightail or interested in Hightail? I'm thinking of checking it out. Amazing. Not amazing. Yeah, it came out a couple of days ago, I think. I've requested a key, but I might just buy it if they don't get back to me and play it. Looks like a kind of a Minecraft-y, obviously, game. Oh, we got a trinket. That's
This
interesting.
expedition at least promises success.
Bleed resist trinket. Really good one. It's fine. A bunch of scrolls. The cursive is too sloppy to read. What is this? That is a bad condition. Let's just look at them. You should keep this art stuff for the second game. I've not played it, but I've heard this people saying that. Oh, we found a secret door. Right here, is it? No, is it here? What have we got here? An ancient artifact. A chest untouched for centuries is a locked compartment on the side of it. Let's unlock that.
Wealth beyond
Whoa!
measure, awarded to the brave and the foolhardy alike.
These are worth 3,500 each. Okay. And then a very rare trinket. Possibly these. Wow. How do I get out of here? Okay. Haven't played the second one, but I'm interested to play in it. Some people seem to like it, but a lot of the reviews say the opposite. I guess scouting is actually really strong. Okay, we don't need to break that because we've got an invitation, and we don't want another one because we've not got the space.
Such blockages are unsurprising. These tunnels predate even the earliest settlers.
Food. Oh shit! It's the treasure. Well, we can keep going, I guess, a little bit. Should we keep going? What's the point? No point. We've got tons of stuff. We're just gonna get Crimson Cursed and get pissed off.
Double benefit. The town may eat, and the swine will not.
Yeah. Enlightened. Plus 10 scouting chance.
A modest offering from those few surrounding farms as yet untouched by the spreading calamity.
Nearby farmers have banded together, increasing security in an effort to protect the healthy livestock and crops upon which the hamlet depends. Supplies and provisions cost nothing. Oh, an occultist item. Crusader item. What was the news? Sem 9 had a night on the town, recovered 56 stress. Lynx no longer has spotted fever. Kazranet removed phengophobia. Satalo removed anemia. The drink in the blood that we had. Okay. We've got lots of money all of a sudden because of that. That's a good thing. Well, let's decide who's we're taking. So we need to take some people who can kill a crocodile that is on the all different layers, right? Like on the 4th layer. So Badger is not going to be great useful, but we're taking Badger because we said we will. Now, let's take... I think Radapaw may be good. Yep. Now, as for a healer, it's probably going to be final. And as for tank, Wholesome Devil, you can chop 1 or 2. Tallo's good. 1, 2, or 3. Sunny. Only 1 or 2. Sunny's not cursed. Tallow is. Let's take Tallow. We need bleeds. We need them to do bleeds on this guy. This hound will do a small bleed. We need to upgrade Hound's Rush. I might have to not take Badger. Who would I take instead? It does like bleeds. Badger can do blights though. Okay, let's take Badger and use blight. So we're gonna upgrade combat skills. Radapaw. Okay, you need to upgrade these combat skills. And take this whistle. I know they can only have 4 active skills. Badger, upgrade your blight. Satalo. Upgrade your crush. Final. You're good. Alright, let's just take this. Let's get you guys' armors and upgraded, I guess. Satalo. Your weapon. Oh, you don't. Yeah, you've got rank 1, rank 1. Badger has this basics. Final has basics. Radapaw has basics. Okay, Radapaw you can get. These can be upgraded. Badger, you can have an upgrade as well. There we go. Generous, generous. Well, we have to keep in mind that provisions are free. Who's stressed, by the way? Rythian is stressed. Let's get Rythian de-stressed. Nolan, you can go for that as well. Sam 9's still stressed. Lothar and Pyro, you guys can go pray. Embark. Off we go to kill the Baron. Good luck. Trinkets. Alright, trinket time. Vestal trinket. Sort by rarity. Abomination. Transformation stress, I actually don't give a fuck. Plus 30% healing skills. I think I like that. %50 prot. Mana arms only. Stun resist. What? Minus 10% stun, minus 10% move resist, plus 4 dodge. Is that good? I want bleed resistance, so yes, that's a good one. Bleed resist there. Higher damage, put that there. 30% bleed resist there. 20% bleed resist there. 20% bleed resist, minus 2 dodge. Bleed resist there. Does the crocodile even do bleed resist? Bleed? I don't know if the crocodile did bleed. I think he did just like... I think we just need dodge, actually. I'm going to change this. This was a bad idea. Dodge, dodge, dodge. Okay, we'll give the Man at Arms this Man at Arms patch then. Well then, I don't need that. I actually don't think he does. Just dodge. Bleed skill chance. Take that. Don't have any more dodge trinkets. Give you protection. Just protection then. Alright, provision. Okay, we have no blood, so that sucks. None of them are craving though. We'll take the 2 that we have here, we'll get some after. Oh yeah, but it's free! Hooray! Look at all the loot we got. Embark. Okay, let's kill this crocodile. We had to abandon the fight with the crocodile the last time because he absolutely owned us. But this time, we're getting him. Torching up, ready to go. What does this do again? Blight, it gives debuff resistance. Okay, that's good. Hello.
A hideous mutation. Unnatural and abhorrent.
Okay. Blight. No point. Let's just have you do a little heal and minus stress. Because he's too far away. Okay, we're going to be bellowing. He resisted the debuffs. Not good. I didn't take Mark. That's a shame. Forgot to do that. The bleed is active. Dodge is final. He's bleeding. The bile, here it comes.
A decisive pummeling.
He's blighted. Nice. We're doing it. He's going after Badger for 10 damage and pulled Badger out of position. Not the worst. We're putting on riposte. He does do a bleed. Okay, good to know. I didn't realise. He's going after Citalo, that's fine. Big damage to Citalo, though. Wait, I forgot to take a dog biscuit. Go. Resisted the bleed. Down he goes. Sneaky, sneaky. Okay, have a repair of that bleed. You're not in the right position, so I'm going to swap you back to here. Final, here come the heals. Big heal. He doesn't have super great chance of stunning, but I'll try. He gets it. It's big. Prevents one of his 2 turns. And he resists bleed. Yikes. Teeth rake on Radapaw is not good. The bile. Let's go. Resisted. I'm gonna heal up Radapaw. Badger can take a few hits. Keep the bile swinging. Missed again. But Blight Resist is removed. So hopefully we'll get him next time. Have a bandage. You are tough. Dodges because he's hiding, I think. Big bite on final, that's not good. Big heal on final, that is good. Okay. Let's keep bellowing. Please don't resist. Nice. That's good. Give Badger the heal now. Send in the hounds. Send in the manacles. Stun resisted. Keep bellowing. Resisted the debuff. Sad to see. A dodge from Radapaw is big. The blights are inbound. And they miss. A blackjack out of Radapaw for a laugh. Resisted the stun. A knockback from Satella. Resisted the stun. Final, doing a little self heal, which is lucky. Moved out of position, which sucks. Ugh. Come on. Let's fucking go. die.
And now the true test.
Right, pause at death's door.
Hold fast or expire.
We're now in struggle territory.
Teetering on the brink, facing the
Goodness
abyss.
gracious. Stun resisted, of course. Dodged, of course. Stun resisted, of course.
More dust. More
This is a good
ashes.
team. What the fuck is going on?
Disappointment.
Transform. Badger's got transform mode. This is insane.
Soothed. Sedated.
This is insane. Can't heal. Because I'm out of position. That's actually not bad. We're out.
Injury and
We're out here.
despondence set the stage for heroism or cowardice.
We're out here. Fuck off.
The
Fuck it.
walls close in. The shadows whisper of conspiracy.
We leave. Failure.
You cannot learn a thing you think you know.
We lost Radapaw, who was really good.
And the pistol. A fitting end to my folly. And a curse upon us all.
Damn it. Damn it, damn it, damn it. You hate to see it. Bill's thirsting for blood. We need more blood, so we have to actually go. We actually have to go back here, for the record, to get more blood. I'll take Bill. Take Sam. Sam loves it there. Take Patrick. Why not? And Tyrion too. What a nightmare. Your party is not fully outfitted with trinkets. Really, Embark? What? I asked for that as a feature. That's never done that before. Did they like stealth patch my suggestion? That's weird. Fire is an effective tool against insects. Why is it telling us that? Do we ever fight insects?
A fortune waiting to be spent.
Okay. I know you guys are craving. That's why we're here.
Mechanical hazards possessed by evil intent.
Yeah, Flytown.
Disadvantage. Give them no quarter. Fiend falls, a faint hope blossoms. Seize this momentum.
We need to get some blood quick for these people. They're desperate. Fucking stop walking into traps.
Mind that such missteps are the exception and not the rule. Formation is broken. Maintain
that fucking crocodile, man. I need the Darkest Dungeon experts to come in here and backseat me and tell me how to do it. Stop trying to stun that guy. He has 170% stun resist. I keep making that mistake. Get good, got it.
Continue the onslaught. Destroy them all.
I know you're all thirsty for blood. And I'm looking as fast as I can. Nice grab. Nice stun. Pass this turn because of his craving. Ugh.
And now the true test. Hold fast or expire.
A full heal from Sim 9 now.
Confidence surges as the enemy crumbles. How quickly the tide turns.
We are mere steps away from the blood. Just keep on walking.
Pride precipitates a dizzying
No
fall.
dying. There, okay, everybody happy? Okay, Sunny took her own turn.
Performed
beyond one's
They're all
limits.
stressing each other out. Okay, the party heal is actually pretty fucking good when you've got these extra healing things.
Eradicated. The wounds of war can
Okay,
be
that's legit. I need to start leveling that up
but
more.
never hidden.
Yes, that's level 1.
Foolish horrors. Brought low and driven into the mud.
Burn it. Have a blood. Blood for treasure, as is the rule. I'm not getting rid of these. I should have used the... I didn't realize it was... Get rid of the torches. Okay, there's a battle in that room. There's a trap. Oh, fuck. I was looking for it. Would have liked to pick a heal there. Oh, these flies.
Destroyed.
Very nice.
Soothed. Sedated.
Actually, that trap popping was pretty good for us. We got loot and we got a heal.
Nightmarish creatures can be felled.
They can be beaten. I don't need that, thank you. Don't need food either, thank you. Ugh, is there a quest on the last room? For fuck's sake.
Wealth beyond measure.
Ugh, that is a lot of money.
Awarded to the brave and the foolhardy alike.
Does one of them not eat there? That's interesting. Aha, I've surprised you.
The blood quickens.
Manservant must die. Nice.
Well struck.
Lovely crit. Bill's gonna get stressed in a second.
Soothed. Sedated.
Ah, it's hiding in the back. Could use that. And a heal. Get these corpses out of here. Bill, virtue? Never virtue.
Self-preservation is paramount at any cost.
That wasn't ideal. Passing your turn. I hate the Crimson Curse.
Remind yourself that overconfidence is a slow and insidious killer.
Sick of this Crimson Curse. I want it all to go away.
The wounds of war can be healed, but never hidden. Festering fear consumes the mind. Unnerved, unbalanced.
One time a virtue, like, would be so kind.
Reeling, gasping, taken over the edge into madness.
But I never get them. No virtues. Turin rejected the heal, even though he just got hit for 20. Not a smart move. Bill, please. Thank God.
Cursed champion falls.
And a crit, so got rid of the body. Brilliant. Heal, Turin. Do not reject it. Good. This is stress. This is like stress, guy.
The abyss returns even the boldest gaze.
Virtue? No, of course not. Of course not.
A powerful blow. The horror.
9 stress per round they're taking. That's not good. Please get this done. Oh.
Dazed, reeling, about to break.
Bill is dead. Of a heart attack.
Wasted in the pursuit of glory and gold.
A virtue. Rare.
Anger is power. Unleash it. A victory. Perhaps the turning point.
Man, I need to take all this fucking shit. I have to... Are you joking? There's still fucking more? I thought I'd be just walking into the room to get to get the fucking loot. Sem 9 is about to have a heart attack. And so is Turin 2. Oh, Patrick, sorry. No, Turin 2. Not Patrick. Maybe Sem 10 soon.
Exposed to a killing blow.
Sem died.
This is no place for the weak or foolhardy.
This is bad. This is really fucking bad. Fuck the characters, guys. All my trinkets are here. All my trinkets are in this run.
As life ebbs, terrible vistas of emptiness reveal themselves. survival is a tenuous proposition in this sprawling tomb. You cannot learn a thing you think you know. An eternity of futile struggle, or penance for my unspeakable transgressions.
Right, well, I think that's enough for today. Guys, thanks for watching. Hope you've enjoyed it. This last bit, you know, pretend this bit didn't happen, I suppose. I will be back on Friday. Maybe playing Hightail or something like that. And never playing that again. But I probably will be. I'll see you on Friday, guys. Have a wonderful couple days. I'll see you then. Bye.